releasing the genetic code for COVID-19, we have multiple vaccines available. So it's been an incredible scientific achievement. Of course, these vaccines are all protected by patents and other types of intellectual property, such as know-how. And those intellectual property rights are ultimately governed by the World Trade Organization, which has a separate agreement on intellectual property rights. And the proposal at the moment is that many developing countries would like to see those intellectual property rights set to one side in order that the vaccines and other technologies, such as diagnostics, can be freely available without the impediment of the intellectual property rights.
Okay, so just explain to us then, because these intellectual property rights are there, I suppose, for a good reason, so that those that design them and come up with them get their just deserve. Of course, it takes the brightest and best to come up with these things. And yet, how much of a hindrance is it then to these developing nations in order to be able to vaccinate their populations?
Under the normal national rules of intellectual property rights, it would be an infringement of the patents and related rights to develop the vaccines and the diagnostic equipment without getting permission from the company that owns those intellectual property rights. So the proposal at the moment is that by setting aside the international law, individual countries would be able to decide for themselves whether the rights would be enforceable in that country, or instead whether a particular country could allow local manufacturers to make the vaccines and diagnostic equipment.
Dr. Matthews, what do you think should happen? I mean, would you say the law needs to take into account these unprecedented times with deaths affecting everyone on a global scale?
Well, I think there are two opposing arguments at the moment. One, as you've correctly said, is that there are proposals that the intellectual property rights should be set aside, or there should be the possibility for countries to do that nationally. And of course, the vaccine manufacturers are arguing that intellectual property rights are a fundamental requirement in order to have the incentive to develop new products. And I think probably the real truth is somewhere in the middle of that. What the developing countries would like to see happen is for voluntary licenses to be granted by the vaccine manufacturers. And the proposal to set aside those IP rights, I think, is sort of the ultimate sanction. It's something that the developing countries can bring to the negotiating table and say, if you as the vaccine manufacturers don't allow us to make the vaccine in our own country, we will take away your intellectual property rights temporarily. So I think it's a negotiating strategy, and the parties need to meet in the middle.
It's a negotiating strategy. How effective is it? I mean, we've seen people calling for this since the start of the pandemic, haven't we? Since the whole debate about vaccines came into play, we've seen people, celebrities getting involved. You know, Meghan and Harry just a few weeks ago in New York, begging for this to be brought into play. Is it going to happen, or is it pie in the sky?
Well, the current rules of the World Trade Organization require at least 2/3 of the member countries of the WTO to support this proposal. And there are doubts at the moment about whether those supporting a waiver of the intellectual property have the numbers to achieve this. But there's going to be a WTO ministerial conference taking place on the 3rd and 4th of December this year. And I think even the richer countries in the world, from the EU, the United Kingdom, and the United States, are going to have to come up with something. I think it would be diplomatically impossible for them not to come to some sort of declaration, at least, expressing concern about the plight of people in developing countries who can't get the vaccines. So we may well see a watered-down version of this proposal to set aside the intellectual property rights, or we may see a delay, but I think we'll see on the 3rd and 4th of December something happening at the World Trade Organization.
Intellectual property waiver for COVID-19, something that just comes in place for a set period of time in a hope to achieve herd immunity, global herd immunity.
Yes, the proposal was originally made a year ago by India and South Africa, And the current version of the proposed IP waiver is that it would be for an initial period of 3 years and would then be reviewed if the pandemic was still continuing. Of course, the United States on the 5th of May this year also said that it would support a waiver of the intellectual property relating to the vaccines, but not to a diagnostic or other equipment. So there is movement in favor of this. And as you say, the overall objective is to realize that nobody is safe until all of us are safe. Otherwise, we will see further mutations of COVID-19 and the continuation of the pandemic will be prolonged. So the objective, I think, is clear: to get people vaccinated. And the real debate is, what role does the intellectual property play in achieving that goal?
OK, so your eyes very much trained then on the beginning of December for perhaps a potential waiver or something similar. And of course, just hearing Gordon Brown yesterday, who's written that letter, hasn't he, outlining the urgency for countries who've been hoarding vaccines to get their supplies over to the developing nations. Really powerful yesterday, when you think that, you know, most developed nations have got around 70% vaccination rates at least, Africa at 5%. It's really stark and, of course, incredibly worrying because, as you say, that's exactly where the virus can mutate and can affect us all again.
Yes, the letter, which was published yesterday by 20 former global leaders, including former Prime Minister Gordon Brown, highlighted the fact that rich nations have stockpiled about 240 million vaccines, which are not being used. So the call is to release those vaccines to people in developing countries through the existing mechanism of the World Health Organization, which is called the COVAX mechanism to distribute the vaccines. But of course, this really highlights the problem of vaccine nationalism, which I think has complicated this argument about whether or not it's the intellectual property that's the barrier, or whether it's actually the vaccine nationalism of rich countries. And of course, the proportion of people who are vaccinated in developing countries can be as low as 2% compared to, of course, over 80% in the developed world. So part of this problem is about the hoarding of vaccines and the need to release those via the World Health Organization. And the other aspect of this is in the view of India and South Africa, to give more negotiating power to the developing countries by allowing them to negotiate on the basis that if no deal can be struck with the vaccine manufacturers, they will have the power to take away the intellectual property rights. So a complex picture of which I think both vaccine nationalism and intellectual property rights play a part.
Dr. Duncan Matthews, Professor of Intellectual Property Law at Queen Mary, University of London. Great to speak to you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, really interesting issue that. Stay with us here on the Great British Breakfast. Coming up, we'll be taking a look at what's making the front of your Saturday morning newspapers with the journalist and the broadcaster Claire Muldoon. That's up next. But first, here's your weekend forecast with Helen Roberts.
Good morning. Unsettled is the theme for this weekend. After some exceptionally wet weather over recent days, we have further warnings for heavy rain in the forecast. And the reason things are quite so unsettled, this large area of low pressure has been sweeping weather fronts across the country in from the Atlantic, and some of those have been slow moving and some of those have been giving some really intense downpours. And this morning is no exception. Already some really heavy downpours have been affecting western and central areas. This weather front will continue to track its way east and northwards as we head through the day today. But we do have some improving conditions following on behind. So much brighter conditions following from the west through this afternoon, although always the risk of a few blustery showers. Temperature-wise, probably not far from where they should be at this time of year, but it will feel a little bit cooler than it has done over recent days. And we keep the clear skies into the first part of the night, but yet another weather front is waiting in the wings, and this one will gradually move in from the west through the early hours of Sunday morning, which is also, don't forget, when the clocks go back. So once again, it will be a very wet start to the day on Sunday morning, not dissimilar to Saturday, with some heavy downpours across western areas at first, and that band of rain once again gradually moving its way north and eastwards across the country. And again, there will be some brighter conditions following in from the west, but this time many more showers are likely, and some of those really will be heavy and quite likely thundery in places as well. So if you are planning to head out trick-or-treating on Sunday evening, do be prepared for some wet and windy weather, and certainly some showers are in the forecast. Now, as I mentioned, it remains unsettled right the way through the weekend and, in fact, into the start of next week, with further bands of rain heading our way as low pressure dominates the weather.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday, called To The Point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the Channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
Welcome back to the Great British Breakfast with Isabel Webster and me, Ellie Costello. It's just gone 6:23. It's that time of the morning. Let's take a look at what's making today's front pages.
Let's start with The Guardian then. This morning it's leading with the upcoming COP26 climate talks. Prime Minister Boris Johnson says too many countries are still doing too little over climate change.
Last chance to save the planet, splashes the I Weekend in their exclusive interview with Boris Johnson ahead of the COP26 Climate Summit. The PM said it will be incredibly difficult to get a result. There has been progress and there are big commitments.
Up next is The Times. China dealing a fresh blow to hopes of a climate deal. According to them, China's appeared to rebuff Boris Johnson's plea to do more on climate change following the Prime Minister's talk with President Xi yesterday. By all accounts, it was a little bit awkward.
To the Daily Express now, and they feature another royal on their front page, Prince Charles, who has urged critical change to the way we live. The Prince of Wales will give the opening address at the COP26 summit in Glasgow on Monday.
The Independent also going heavy on the climate change message. Its front page simply reads, "Time for action."
The Daily Telegraph today leads with the continuing row with France over fishing licences. French Prime Minister Jean Castex has said Britain must be shown that Brexit is damaging. He's written to European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen in an attempt to get EU allies to back his hardline stance against the UK.
The FT Weekend also reporting on that fishing row with France. President Emmanuel Macron has warned that the UK's international reputation is in trial over disputes surrounding those fishing rights.
And the Queen's been told rest for 2 weeks. The Mirror leading with the story that Her Majesty has been urged to rest for a further fortnight, meaning she will miss the Festival of Remembrance event.
And the Mail reporting on the Queen's new health fears as Buckingham Palace reveals Her Majesty's been ordered to cancel all public engagements and only take on light desk-based duties.
And as always, something a little different on the front page of The Star. Apparently, the CIA has said Uri Geller's powers aren't fake and his spoon-bending trick is real.
Are we still talking about that? Honestly, how many decades can they get front pages out of Uri Geller and his spoon bending? Anyway, let's talk about what's inside the papers with broadcaster and journalist Claire Muldoon. She's in the studio with us, as always, this Saturday morning. Very good morning.
Good morning, girls.
Let's have a little look then at what you found inside the papers.
OK, we've had quite a tumultuous week. Last week we were discussing the rollout of the boosters that weren't happening. So the UK have got their act together now and the boosters are, up and track and running, which is great. I've booked in for mine on November the 6th, so that's great news. Uri Geller, the CIA, says he now has form in terms of, his magical powers. I think he should be sent to COP26 to see if we can get anything sorted. And indeed, hopefully he can maybe even intervene in the French, UK, Jersey, Northern Ireland fishing wars, which we're going to start with today.
Okay.
So President Macron has accused the UK of not showing enough credibility, and he's actually saying, well, Brexit's clearly not working for us. It always seems to be very much, if it's not working for me, then it's not working for the greater good, then we have to do something about it. Well, it's Brexit. The UK decided to leave Europe, but apparently now the French have said that the UK and Jersey have revoked on some fishing licences, and that has put the French up in arms. It doesn't take much to put the French up in arms, I have to say. But in this, President Macron and the French Prime Minister, Jean Castex, will be taking it up with our PM at the G20 in Rome and indeed the COP26 in Glasgow.
Yes, so it's going to be this so-called brush pass between Emmanuel Macron and Boris Johnson. I mean, it's the last thing Boris needs, isn't it, to have a bit of a war or a fight, as the French like to call it, overfishing ahead of all of these big events, the G20 and the COP26. And yet it's not going away, because the background to all of this is there is a French election in 6 months.
Yep.
And all of this is obviously quite a totemic issue, isn't it?
And to extend the metaphor, the French are casting their net over the Scottish waters, the Northern Irish waters as well. And they're bringing in the Northern Ireland Protocol. And I really don't want Article 16 to be triggered, but I think it will be triggered on the back of fishing. Anything will be used as an excuse. And Number 10, quite rightly, have come out now, and all the PR have said, look, we're not commenting on this. Let's just get everything out at COP26 and the G20 Summit in Rome, and then let's, get things sorted from then.
Yeah, OK. So that's fishing. And you're taking us now to the G20 in Rome.
In Rome, beautiful Rome.
Yeah, what else is going to be on their agenda, obviously?
Well, it is all about climate change, isn't it, really? And the statistics are quite staggering. 80% of the G20 countries are responsible for 80% of the carbon emissions, which I think is hugely, hugely destructive to everything. And they will have to come together. But as a normal punter, who is telling them, one, what to do, how to evaluate how that's being done, and actually what the response is? What do they want? At the end of the day, what do they want to have achieved? And there's very little interest, there's very little information on that, other than they need to keep this 1.5% Celsius change. They can't go above 1.5 Celsius change, because obviously there's going to be devastating effects to the poorer countries in the world. There'll be more flooding, more fires, more tsunamis, etc., and they don't have the infrastructure, nor do they have the financial equipment to deal with the aftermath of that. And if the country heats up as much as it is, the effect on our grandchildren, their grandchildren, and their future children will be devastating, because you'll have massive amounts of migration of populations, of civilizations moving. So there'll be no sense of community. There will be no life as no life as we know it.
Well, no,
I did say that.
Yeah, but it's the point that Boris Johnson's making. He's done this exclusive, hasn't he, with the Eye, and he's basically likened it to the fall of the Roman Empire, saying that civilizations can unravel very, very quickly. And he forecasts, if I can use that expression, that we could well see that if we don't get a grip of this problem, because, as you say, mass migration and climate wars and tensions and all the rest of it. So he's really ramping up the rhetoric. But I suppose it all comes back to what the Queen said a couple of weeks ago, whether or not there's all talk, but if there will actually be any action, not least because we haven't got Russia or China sitting down at the table at either of those.
Well, and to be honest with you, I don't think gluing your face to tarmac does any good either. I mean, I think these, what are they called?
Well, there's Insulate Britain.
Insulate Britain, on the back of climate change and carbon emissions, I don't think that's the issue. I think they should be stopped immediately. That is not a protest in my view. And I think, as the Queen quite rightly said, is if there's no action, is what, and that's one of the points I made. Where is the action and how will it be evaluated?
And the other thing, Claire, other than the climate, will be the vaccine monopoly, which will be on the agenda, and that pressure to get the vaccine to poorer countries. What we're saying, 3%. Some countries in Africa that have not even received one vaccine yet.
It is absolutely disgusting, and I think we've got a moral obligation to help our fellow people out. It's abhorrent.
It's interesting because there's been lots of people talking about when we're going to get our booster jabs for people like you and me, under 50. I'm assuming no reason why you'd need one, Ellie, early. And yet, there are many people who haven't had a single dose yet. And really, it's such greed, isn't it, when you think about it like that?
Well, it is. It is completely greedy.
And we can't open up, can we, until, the world can't get anywhere near the new normal if not every country has been vaccinated, because that's where we'll see different variants coming from, and then we'll be back in the same place again.
Well, hopefully not.
Well, hopefully not, yeah. We've got a story about Greta Thunberg.
Of course we have.
Week, hasn't she?
There'll be no smoke without fire. Can I even use that? Greta Thunberg wants to go to Glasgow. Has she been invited? Apparently not, she said. She said that I think many people will be scared if they invite too many radical young people, then that might make them look bad. I think you'll make them look bad enough, Greta, if you turn up with your scarf and your protest and your placard-waving lunatic friends. I think that girl needs to be just removed from the whole thing. I had a discussion yesterday with some people who think she's great and she's young and she is the future and, she makes great points. I think she's just an angry young woman who's been given a platform that just makes a lot of noise about it. Let her go to Glasgow. There's a great BBC Scotland parody of the two actors who play Jack and Victor, actually, and they play her parents. And they said, oh, isn't it great? Greta's not here. We can actually eat meat and take flights and stuff like that. It's hilarious.
I don't know. I don't understand why so many people take objection to her. I wonder, and I'm sorry to say this, but I do wonder if it would be the same level of, questioning her if it was a middle-aged man. Is it because she's a young female that we don't want to be lectured by her?
No, I don't think it's that.
What's wrong with her being so passionate about her message, given that the world's leaders all pretty much agree with what she's saying?
Because I think she's part of the. I think she's a part of the elite. I think if she practiced what she preached, it'd be completely different. She's flying everywhere.
She's not, though.
Oh, Isabel, come on.
Oh, I think Greta Thunberg's got a pretty good record for her travel and all the rest of it.
Has she? I was about to say, she would be getting the train up there, I think.
She'd be blooming lucky if she can get the train up there, because my daughter tried to get back from Glasgow down to Leeds yesterday, and it took her over 7.5 hours, what with all the flooding up in Glasgow.
Well, I do think it will be very interesting to see if we do see Insulate Britain make their way up to Glasgow, if we do see Greta Thunberg make her way up to Glasgow. It does seem like the place where they want to be.
Yeah, well, let us know your thoughts at home. We know what Claire thinks of Greta Thunberg. Let us know what you think. I suspect I know what most of you at home will think of her as well. Get in touch the usual way. Claire, we'll see you again in 7 o'clock hour. Stay with us. We're with you all the way until 10. Still to come this hour, Rhiannon Jones will be here in the studio taking us through the biggest stories from the world of sport. That's next.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday, called To The Point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the Channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
Welcome back to the Great British Breakfast with Isabel Webster and me, Ellie Costello. It's time now to get all of the day's sports news. Here's Rhiannon Jones.
Thank you, Ellie. Well, there are 7 games in the Premier League today, but the big one takes place in North London this evening as Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's Manchester United take on Tottenham Hotspur. They'll be hoping to bounce back from their heavy defeat to Liverpool last weekend. Pressure's been mounting on Solskjaer following that 5-0 thrashing at Old Trafford.
It's been a difficult week, of course. It's we've had to deal with the result and performance against Liverpool, which we know that wasn't good enough, and that's something that footballers have to deal with. That's why we're in this game, and you've got to look forward to the next game. Make sure you're ready for that game, and when you get to that game, sort it out what has been challenging and the problems earlier on. And we've had a good week on the training field. I have to say that.
There's an intriguing match-up in the early kick-off as 2 of the form teams go head-to-head. Arsenal, unbeaten in their last 8, face Leicester City. They haven't lost since September. The top 3 are all in action at 3 o'clock. Liverpool are at home to Brighton and Manchester City host Crystal Palace. They're both chasing leaders Chelsea, who are away at Newcastle. Meanwhile, Burnley face Brentford and Southampton go to Watford. In the Championship, Jack Colback helped Nottingham Forest salvage a point in stoppage time as they drew 1-1 at QPR. Colback struck in the 91st minute following Scotland international Lyndon Dykes' opener in first half stoppage time. It's Colback's first league goal since March 2019. The points at that point move QPR up to 5th. At lunchtime, it's 2nd versus 3rd as Fulham take on West Brom at 3. Bristol City face Barnsley. Derby County are up against Blackburn Rovers. Millwall travel to Huddersfield. Hull City are at home to 4th-placed Coventry City. Middlesbrough host Birmingham City. Luton Town are away to Preston. Sheffield United meet Blackpool. Stoke City play Cardiff City. Swansea City face Peterborough United. And in tonight's kick-off, Reading come up against leaders Bournemouth. In Scotland, Celtic have the chance to go top of the league for the first time in a year as they welcome Livingston to Parkhead. They meet at 3. Current leaders Rangers are in action tomorrow against Motherwell. If Celtic slip up, Hearts, who are away to Aberdeen, and Dundee United, who are at home to St Johnstone, well, they could both leapfrog Celtic. Meanwhile, Hibs are away to bottom club Ross County and St Mirren face Dundee. To rugby now, and New Zealand-born Gareth Anscombe will make his first Wales start since 2019 when they face the All Blacks in Cardiff later. Wales head coach Wayne Pivac also faces his home country, and a particularly special game for him as his family, who he's not seen for the last few years, they'll be watching.
It honestly feels like home here because I can't get into the other countries. So for me, we've been here for 2 years now. You don't see your family, haven't seen them for 2 years. So I know they'll be supporting and they'll be watching, of course they will. But I guess with me doing the role I'm doing, there's a lot of friends and family back there and a lot around the globe that are supporting Wales now. So look, we just want to do well for people in Wales and people from outside of Wales that are supporting us.
Meanwhile, in the Premiership, Exeter launched a second-half fight back and then survived a late Gloucester assault to win 16-13 at Kingsholm. Exeter trailed by 7 points before second-half tries from Alec Hepburn and Will Whitty secured a narrow win. It ends Gloucester's 4-match unbeaten run. This afternoon, Bottom Club Bath are at home to Wasps. London Irish face Bristol. Leaders Leicester will aim to maintain their perfect start at Northampton. Saints and Worcester are up against Sale. England's cricketers will be hoping to maintain their perfect start to the T20 World Cup this afternoon when they take on Australia. Owen Morgan's side sit top of Group 1 after 2 games in Super 12s. They've already beaten holders West Indies and Bangladesh.
It's probably going to be one of our most difficult games in this group stage. Australia are a very strong side. They've gone 2 from 2, very much like us, and have started the tournament well. I think one thing that we'll be most proud of so far is our level of performance and intensity has been pretty good in the 2 games that we've played. Obviously, the challenge is continuing that for our next 3 games in pursuit of getting through to that next phase of the tournament.
Now, Emma Raducanu's hopes of facing her idol Simona Halep in the Transylvania Open were ended yesterday. The 18-year-old US Open champion was knocked out of the quarter-finals by Marta Kostya, comprehensively beaten 6-2, 6-1 by her teenage Ukrainian opponent, who now goes on to face top seed Halep. But for more reaction to Raducanu's exit and the latest from across the other competitions is tennis contributor, journalist and writer Ravi Ubar. Ravi, thank you very much for joining us this morning at this early hour. How disappointed will Emma be, especially given that she had the support of her family there this time?
Rhiannon, I think she's not going to be overly disappointed. And I think I have to analyze this match both at a micro level and a macro level. The micro level, she said afterwards she was feeling a little bit tired going into the match. And that would explain her unforced error count, the fact that she made more than 40 in 2 sets, going for balls, going for big shots very early in rallies. So I think that could partially explain what happened. We have to remember that she made the quarterfinals. That's a very, very good result, picking up her first WTA win, which is a win outside the Grand Slams, besides the US Open. And I think she's always somebody who we've discovered already has a very, very good sense of perspective. She realizes that her career is going to be a long one. This is a very, very, very small bump in the road. And I think no matter what happened to Emma after she won the US Open, even if she didn't win another match, I think you wouldn't have been able to read a whole lot into it after what happened in New York, which was just a massive life-changing event.
And she has, you say that there, Emma has herself said that we need to be patient. She's not the finished product. It's going to take time, isn't it?
Oh, yes, definitely, Rhiannon. I also have to say that the depth in women's tennis is amazing. It's the best that it has ever been. But she is only just 18 years of age. There are things that she's learning, for example, how to play in these events week in, week out. She'll be doing more of that next season. She'll have to learn with the expectation and the pressure. I mean, just remarkable, Rhiannon. When you think of how she's grown the last couple of years, her following, she has more than 2 million followers on Instagram or Twitter, more than 600,000 after Wimbledon, where she was pretty much an unknown, or at least to most people in the UK. So it is going to be a process, and I think people should expect and realize that in tennis, there are going to be more losses than wins. I mean, if you're looking at tournaments every week, fields of 32, fields of 64, there's something that players and a lot of young players have said in the past when they've had this pressure thrust on them, they have to learn how to lose, because week on week, you're going to be losing more in tennis than you are going to be winning.
And I read that she's been getting used to coaching herself, she said. What's the situation with her coach? Why is it taking so long to find one?
I think just to give some idea of the tennis season, it is such a long season, starting in January in most campaigns, ending in November, late October. There aren't many coaching changes that happen, at least in terms of big name coaches as well, during a season. The time that it's going to happen is probably around the next 2 weeks. Once the season comes to an end, we have a bit of a coaching carousel to see what is going to happen. We know she's been working a little bit hitting with Esteban Carril, a bit of a test for those two. He, of course, used to work with the former British #1, Joe Conte, has a very, very good pedigree. Some other big names have been kind of linked with Emma in the mix, nothing decided yet. But I think another thing we've learned so far from Raducanu is that she's somebody who's not going to rush into things, not somebody who's going to jump into things. She's going to take her time and wants to get the right person in place. And once that happens, once she gets the coach in place for the offseason, she'll have a good block, a good chunk of time. It's not going to be the longest. It's not going to be 3, 4, 5 months, but it's going to be probably 4 or 5 weeks when she does have the new coach in place, just to gear up for the next campaign.
Ravi, I do want to talk about Cameron Norrie. In Vienna, disappointment too for the new British #1. Did you expect him to go further, and what next for him?
I think I expected him to go as far as he did, Rhiannon, and I say that because, obviously after he won in Indian Wells, there's going to be so many people thinking, he won the biggest title outside the majors. He's going to go on this charge and continue to win these big matches. It's not easy mentally to keep on doing what these players, the players like Roger and Rafa and Novak, what they've done over the years in Serena, to win week after week after week. Now, this has been the breakthrough campaign for Cam, but to do what he did in Indian Wells and then to follow up and, let's say, for example, win another big title straight away, as he was in Vienna, that was always going to be difficult. And it was a tough one. He had match points against Felix Auger-Aliassime in the second set. He'll be kicking himself because it's a match that he had in his pocket. He wasn't really troubled on serve for the first 2 sets before the Canadian was able to turn it around. So not surprised when you have to just factor in how long the tennis season is and how tough it is to maintain this sort of consistency at the highest level.
Absolutely. Ravi, thank you very much. That's all from us. We'll be back in just under an hour's time. See you then.
Rhiannon Jones with the sports for us there. Let's take a look at what else is making news headlines this morning. And Boris Johnson has arrived in Rome ahead of the annual G20 meeting. There, he'll urge leaders of the world's biggest economies to cut damaging carbon emissions. His comments come ahead of the UK hosting the COP26 climate conference, which, of course, is opening on Monday.
The Prime Minister has vowed to do whatever is necessary to ensure UK interests are protected in the row with France over fishing licences. This comes as Emmanuel Macron has accused the UK of not showing credibility on Brexit. Both leaders are due to talk later today at the G20 Summit. Could be awkward.
Lawyers for Prince Andrew have asked a New York judge to throw out a civil lawsuit brought against him. They're seeking to dismiss the claims that were brought by Virginia Giuffre, who accuses the Duke of York of sexually abusing her when she was 17, legally underage in the States. The royal unequivocally denies sexually abusing or assaulting her.
And the weather, rain, heavy at times over parts of England, Scotland and Wales. It'll slowly clear away eastwards and sunny spells will follow. Heavy showers for some, mainly in the south and the west.
OK, it is 6:48 on your Saturday morning. Time to look at some of the biggest finance stories today with the business and finance commentator Michael Wilson. Very good morning to you, Michael. You'll have heard us a few moments ago discussing Greta Thunberg. Always gets people have strong opinions on her, always. And she's calling on banks to stop funding our destruction ahead, of course, of COP26.
COP26 isn't going, and neither is Greta, going to sprinkle some magic dust over the change to climate change all over the world. It simply isn't going to happen. What is gradually happening, is that some shareholders in big oil, and I'm talking about the likes of BP, ExxonMobil, and so on, which, all right, they are big oil companies. They are still extracting fossil fuels. They are still, unfortunately and uncomfortably, part of all our investments. If you have a pension with your company or you have a private pension, they're probably part of that somewhere. But gradually, very, very gradually, shareholders are becoming much more like stakeholders and saying, yeah, we would like some kind of change from energy companies, from fossil fuels, into something which is a bit more climate friendly. That is gradually happening. That is not going to happen as a result of COP26 or anybody else talking about it. It's a gradual process as more people become aware of it. However, this is equally important as well. Go to a developing country and say, okay, what we want you to do is to not use fossil fuels, not use coal. Go to India and tell them not to use coal. Go to China, which is not coming to COP26, and say, don't use coal in your development. They'll say, what are you talking about? It's all right coming from a country which is already developed, like a lot of developed nations actually are. But don't tell us what to do. We haven't got to your level yet. When we get to your level, then we'll worry about the climate. But until that happens, we're not going to. Now, in a sense, that's a perverse sort of honesty, isn't it? They're actually saying, you can't lecture us from the heights when we're trying to get up from the foothills. It just simply won't work. But there are trends that are making the big oil companies become more climate friendly, become more green. But it'll take time, and it will not be as a result of this summit coming up.
Yeah, it's a really important point you make about China. I think the UK is responsible for around 1% of carbon emissions, and yet China is something like 25%, and yet they haven't even reached their peak. They reckon it'll be around 2030. And if, as you say, they're not even attending COP26, will it even make any difference? It's the big question, I suppose, in all of this. Should we talk about Volvo? Also got links to China as well. Doing quite well on the stock exchange.
Volvo is an extraordinary company, isn't it, when you think about it? I mean, founded in the 1920s, and it pioneered. Do you remember, well, you're probably not old enough, but I certainly remember in the 70s, it was the car that drove around with its lights on all the time. I mean, everybody used to joke about it. But actually, they put themselves right up there as far as safety is concerned. And their 2020 pledge from their managing director is no one should be killed or seriously injured in a Volvo car. They pioneered crumple zones, they pioneered collapsible steering wheels and so on. They were sold by Ford in 2010 for a meager £1.8 million, and here they are floating. They're at £16 billion on the Swedish Stock Exchange. It's which is quite an achievement. So and people are buying into their electric SUVs. It's not a Tesla yet, but it's certainly getting there. I think this is good news for those who feel as though electric vehicles are the way ahead. They clearly are, because the infrastructure's got a long way to go. But certainly what we're seeing here is a very important indicator on that road towards electric cars.
Yeah. Michael, got to ask you about the fears for a crisp shortage. Walker's crisps, they've been disrupted by an IT upgrade, haven't they?
I had a very busy day yesterday, starting off with GBNews, which I enjoy hugely, and then doing various other things. And my wife said, I'll pick you up from the station. She said, did you do it? I said, what are you talking about? I said, what have I done? Did you? And I knew what she was talking. Did I have the cheese and onion crisps on the train? You bet I did. Am I worried about it? Yes, I am. Can you still get them at Waterloo? Yes, you can. Can you get them on your... This is terrible news, isn't it? The world is coming to an end. No what's-its. And cheese and onion crisps being threatened by this Leicester-based firm. Do you know what? I somehow think it'll get better. We've had a pledge from Walkers saying that they're working round the clock to make sure that we get our Walkers products. Well, good luck to them. I had to confess that it was me. It was that person. I was that person crunching on the train.
I'm amazed your wife had to ask if anyone's eaten cheese and onion crisps and they're sharing a car with you. You don't need to be told what they've been consuming. I suppose they need to unleash Gary Lineker. He might be able to solve all Walker's problems here.
Chewing gum's the answer, to be absolutely honest. But
there you go. Well, let's hope there's no supply problems there. Good to see you, Michael. We'll be back with you shortly.
Thanks, Michael. Coming up at the top of the next hour.
We're going to do some
No,
GB
we're going to do
Views
some
first,
GB Views,
shall we?
actually, aren't
You've been emailing in your droves, so we should really give them a bit of an airing.
Yeah.
We asked you, are world leaders arriving in Rome for the G20... Sorry, as world leaders arrive in Rome for the G20 Summit, what issues should they be discussing and what have they been saying?
So Max says we should be asking who got the best mileage on their massive jets or their caravans or their cars to get them around. They only need to meet in person to do backroom deals. Otherwise, they should do Zoom calls.
Do you know, there's so many people saying that you just have to look at their carbon footprint in the last few months to ask whether or not there's a huge amount of hypocrisy. Chloe jokes, should stuffed crust be the standard for pizza places? That should be the issue they're discussing. Well, I tell you what, they're in the right place to be talking about pizzas, aren't they? Nowhere better than in Rome.
Yeah, they're busy, aren't they? They're in Rome and then they're off to Glasgow on Mondays. That's a lot of air travel, isn't it? Jim says, how about they turn around and go away again? No good will come out of this. They'll just come up with new ways to empty people's pockets. I know a lot of people are asking questions about how much will this actually achieve, the G20 summit?
Scott suggests, how about they help normal, hard-working people rather than just putting climate change onto us, which we don't actually want. Another view saying the huge carbon footprint emitting from their flights, do as we say, not as we do, coming back to that hypocrisy point. And another viewer joking, good to see our Prime Minister Carrie Symonds there. She's, of course, on her first foreign papers making something of it. She hasn't been abroad with the Prime Minister yet, I think probably linked to COVID and various other commitments like having a baby, etc. But she's there in Rome alongside the Prime Minister.
Coming up, Boris Johnson will attempt to push G20 leaders to follow their climate commitments ahead of COP26.
And the Prime Minister might be having an awkward conversation with Emmanuel Macron in Rome over that ongoing French fishing row. We'll have all the details for you at 7 o'clock, but first, here's your weekend forecast.
Good morning. Unsettled is the theme for this weekend. After some exceptionally wet weather over recent days, we have further warnings for heavy rain in the forecast. And the reason things are quite so unsettled, this large area of low pressure has been sweeping weather fronts across the country in from the Atlantic, and some of those have been slow moving and some of those have been giving some really intense downpours. And this morning is no exception. Already some really heavy downpours have been affecting western and central areas. This weather front will continue to track its way east and northwards as we head through the day today. But we do have some improving conditions following on behind. So much brighter conditions following from the west through this afternoon, although always the risk of a few blustery showers. Temperature-wise, probably not far from where they should be at this time of year, but it will feel a little bit cooler than it has done over recent days. And we keep the clear skies into the first part of the night, but yet another weather front is waiting in the wings, and this one will gradually move in from the west through the early hours of Sunday morning, which is also, don't forget, when the clocks go back. So once again, it will be a very wet start to the day on Sunday morning, not dissimilar to Saturday, with some heavy downpours across western areas at first, and that band of rain once again gradually moving its way north and eastwards across the country. And again, there will be some brighter conditions following in from the west, but this time many more showers are likely, and some of those really will be heavy and quite likely thundery in places as well. So if you are planning to head out trick-or-treating on Sunday evening, do be prepared for some wet and windy weather, and certainly some showers are in the forecast. Now, as I mentioned, it remains unsettled right the way through the weekend and, in fact, into the start of next week, with further bands of rain heading our way as low pressure dominates the weather.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GBNews.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday. Call to the point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the Channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday right here on GB News for To The Point.
Good morning, you're waking up to the Great British Breakfast here on GB News with Isabel Webster and me, Ellie Costello. And these are the stories that matter this Saturday, the 30th of October.
The annual G20 Summit gets underway today. Leaders from the 20 countries with the largest and fastest growing economies are convening in Rome to discuss climate change, among other things. And GB News is travelling with the Prime Minister and we'll have updates for you throughout the morning.
Boris Johnson has promised to do whatever is necessary to ensure UK interests over the fishing licences dispute with France. But while the Prime Minister claims Paris's behaviour could be in breach of the UK's Brexit deal with the EU, France's President Emmanuel Macron has suggested the UK has not kept its Brexit pledges. So, who's in the right?
The Queen's been advised to rest for at least the next 2 weeks. Her doctors say she can undertake light, desk-based duties, but shouldn't make any official visits. But Her Majesty hopes to still be able to attend the National Service of Remembrance on Remembrance Sunday.
And it's a big weekend for people in Northern Ireland as COVID restrictions continue to ease. We've been at the races where crowds are being welcomed back for the first time since the start of the pandemic.
Well, our top story this hour and over the next couple of days, we'll see world leaders descending on the city of Glasgow as they prepare to meet for what some say are crucial climate talks at the COP26 event.
But before that kicks off on Monday, the likes of Australia's Scott Morrison, Canada's Justin Trudeau, Germany's Angela Merkel, and of course our very own Boris Johnson will be sitting down with a long list of other PMs and presidents to discuss COVID-19 and the post-pandemic global recovery.
Well, they'll also be turning their heads towards climate change ahead of COP26, and Boris Johnson will use the two-day event to urge other countries to honour their commitments to cut damaging carbon emissions.
Now, if you're wondering what exactly is the G20, well, it's a series of high-level international talks by the world's wealthiest nations, which takes place annually. In turn, each nation gets to host the talks, and this year it's Italy in the driving seat.
So last night, a string of presidential planes touched down in Rome, and our very own political editor, Darren McCaffrey, was aboard the PM's aircraft, and this morning he sent us this report.
Well, there's no doubt as world leaders gather here in Rome for the G20 this weekend, the key issue clearly is of climate change ahead of COP26, which is due to be held in Glasgow from tomorrow onwards. And it is interesting listening to the Prime Minister on the way over. It is, of course, the UK chairing COP, that he very much views this as an attempt to try and get world leaders to do more, to make more commitments when it comes to climate change targets. He talked about the serious consequences he believes that climate change could cause the world in the century ahead, that he essentially had a big conversion moment as Prime Minister to the seriousness of this all, talking about and referencing Rome in this and the fall of the Roman Empire, how humanity as a whole could potentially see our civilization, our world go backwards like it did after the fall of the Roman Empire, and that could consign future generations to a life that is far less agreeable to our own. He also pulled out a football metaphor, if you like, talking about how he thought that we were at half-time and that ultimately we as humanity were 5-1 down, but had time to try and turn things Iran. The big question, though, of course, for Boris Johnson as he preps these world leaders ahead of COP is essentially what does success look like in Glasgow? He keeps talking about how those commitments of zero carbon by various countries in recent days and weeks are really important, whether that's in 2040, 2050, 2060, but also trying to keep alive this fundamental target that was set in France of keeping global temperatures at 1.5 degrees, that increase at 1.5 degrees, though that is looking increasingly unlikely, it must be said. But this is, he says, a crucial moment. And that's where an awful lot of his focus will be as he talks to world leaders here in Rome.
Darren McCaffrey there for us in Rome. Well, Boris Johnson will use the G20 summit as an opportunity to urge fellow world leaders to make good on their commitments to cut damaging carbon emissions ahead of the COP26 conference.
The Prime Minister's attending the G20 summit in Rome as key leaders gather in advance of the climate change talks that are then taking place in Glasgow. Downing Street say the Prime Minister will be taking a tough message to Rome to hold countries which have done the most to cause global warming accountable to those experiencing the most severe consequences. Well, Stuart Hazeldine is a Professor of Carbon Capture and Storage at the University of Edinburgh. Very good morning to you, Stuart. Look, this is obviously putting carbon capture front and centre of international policy. It's very much important that countries work together, isn't it? Because no one country can solve this issue on their own. How hopeful are you that COP26 could make a difference?
Well, COP26 has to make a difference because these meetings are often billed as a last chance for humanity and a last chance for the world. And in some ways, that's true because we've started all this literally 30 or 40 years too late. So we're still playing catch up. And to expand the Prime Minister's metaphor, it's as if we're trying to play the football game with only half the players on the field. So we need all of the players to come onto the field and really start passing the ball between them and making progress. And what this meeting is about is probably trying to build momentum and build confidence amongst some of those major actors of big economies.
Well, as you say, with half the team isn't on the pitch, you know, what then can be achieved without China or Russia properly attending? We know they're sending delegations, but we're not going to see President Putin or Xi Jinping there. And obviously that chat between the Prime Minister and Xi Jinping not particularly fruitful yesterday either.
Well, I think China has got plenty of issues at home to sort out at the moment. So both China and Russia have got virus issues to sort out. And so you don't need to commit to be attending in person. It's rather the communication between home base and the representatives in the talks. And so it's clear that really big countries and really huge emitters like the United States, China, Australia, and Brazil, Saudi Arabia do need to up their game on making more ambitious pledges to reduce their emissions. But that will only come if there's confidence that everybody's moving together. So China has made some moves. Notably, it committed at the United Nations to stop building new coal-fueled power plants outside of China. But it would be good if China would, let's say, commit to not building any more new coal plants at all, even in China. And the United States has to make a lot of moves as well. So it has to do similar things to reduce its consumption of coal, capture some carbon from gas-fueled power plant, reduce its emissions from motor vehicles. So all these are items to play for, and that's what the Prime Minister will be trying to do during the G20.
Good morning to you, Stuart. So we know that Boris Johnson is going to use G20 to urge leaders of the world's biggest economies to make good on those promises that they've made to cut carbon emissions. We have obviously pledged to hit net zero emissions by 2050. A lot of that, well, it's very important, isn't it, to rely on carbon capture and storage. In that sense, how are we doing in the UK in terms of our carbon capture and storage? And should those G20 countries be looking to us as an example in that sense?
Okay, so carbon capture and storage is a set of technologies where you can carry on burning coal, gas or oil, but instead of dumping the carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, you try and catch the carbon dioxide chemically by building capture sites at big power plants like you're showing there and put the carbon dioxide underground. So to reach net zero, it's absolutely essential that carbon capture and storage exists, or we have to get out of fossil fuels completely. And there are different lobby groups proposing either of those two routes. So the UK has talked about carbon capture and storage since the early 2000s, literally for 15, 20 years or more now. And about 2 weeks ago announced 2 carbon capture projects and linked to taking carbon emissions out of our industries. But actually 3 or 4 of the regions of the UK passed the criteria. So although it's great to have 2 of those regions going forward to build carbon capture, we actually need all 4 and all 6 eventually regions of the UK. So the government in the UK has really given us a 2/3 full cup of carbon capture and storage, and we need that full to overflowing if we're going to meet our net zero emissions.
It's been one of the great ironies of being in news at this crazy time in history when we're talking about carbon capture, and yet we're also talking about a shortage of carbon dioxide in the supply chain. And is it very crude of me to make any linkage there? Could sort of carbon capture and storage actually help us solve some of the problems that we're seeing in terms of the supply chain at the moment?
Yeah, so I think it was a big surprise to many people to learn that so much carbon dioxide was so valuable, because we really throw most of it away into the atmosphere at the moment. But there's 2 comments I'd make on that. Firstly, that we have to stop activities which emit carbon dioxide into the air. So some of those activities we currently use carbon dioxide for either need to change or need to fit the methods of recovering and capturing that carbon dioxide to put it underground. And secondly, as we build facilities and industries which will capture carbon dioxide and make pure carbon dioxide available to go down into permanent storage and take that away from the atmosphere, that will make more sources and diverse sources of carbon dioxide available for those industries which need to continue to use it, but they will have to pay more and more to emit carbon dioxide into the air. At the moment, the price of carbon dioxide emitting for each ton of carbon dioxide, the larger industries have to buy certificates permission at about £50 per ton. And I think that will continue, and that will spread to many more industries around the UK, and also the price will gradually increase, making it more and more worthwhile for industries not to emit, but to capture their carbon and put it underground. And that I see that as a big progression which is still to come.
Stuart Hazeldine, thank you so much for talking to us. Really fascinating stuff. Stuart Hazeldine is the Professor of Carbon Capture and Storage at the University of Edinburgh.
Should we take a look at what else is making headlines today? And Her Majesty the Queen has been advised by her doctors to rest for a further 2 weeks. Her Majesty recently underwent tests in hospital and cancelled a 2-day trip to Northern Ireland. She'll not attend any official visits during this time and will only undertake light desk-based duties.
COVID-19 booster jabs can now be given to certain vulnerable people sooner than 6 months after they've had their second dose. Guidance from the UK Health Security Agency has changed to protect those at highest risk, including care home residents.
People in Northern Ireland should expect to show proof of vaccination status. That's what the First Minister, Paul Givan, has said ahead of nightclubs opening in the region for the first time in 19 months. Stormont has advised venues to introduce their own COVID entry checks, but other Northern Irish parties are calling for legally enforceable COVID passports.
Commuter train journeys across Britain are at less than half of pre-pandemic figures. Industry body the Rail Delivery Group say the number of people travelling to and from work via Britain's railways in mid-October was 45% of what it was before the COVID-19 crisis. However, journeys are up 33% and leisure travel is almost back to what it was before the pandemic.
And in sport, and the US Open champion Emma Raducanu is out of the Transylvania Open after losing her quarter-final match to Marta Kostyuk 6-2, 6-1. Kostyuk will face the tournament's top seed Simona Halep in the last 4.
And the weather. Rain, heavy at times over parts of England, Scotland and Wales. It will slowly clear away eastwards and sunny spells will follow. Heavy showers for some, mainly in the south and the west.
Now then, who thought we'd be talking so much about fishing during the whole Brexit debate. Now the French President Emmanuel Macron has appeared to suggest that the UK has not kept its commitment to the withdrawal agreement. He made his comments that the fishing rights row and disputes over the Northern Irish border were a test of the UK's reliability. Well, President Macron told the Financial Times, when you spend years negotiating a treaty and then a few months later you do the opposite of what was decided on the aspects that suit you the least, it's not a big sign of your credibility.
Well, here to speak to us is Mike Park, Chief Executive of the Scottish Whitefish Producers Association. Good morning to you, Mike. Now, you've had some experience dealing with French fishermen in the Channel. So on that note, what do you think of the current row in the water between France and the UK?
Yeah, you're right. I do have some experience of, I guess, sitting down and discussing and negotiating with the French fishermen over the years. I think it's something of nothing. I mean, this is an administrative issue that's now been escalated to a political level that is beyond belief. And I think, we need to look at the reasons why that is. And there is an election coming up, and Macron is fighting hard for the coastal vote. But we have a situation here that's clear in my eyes and the eyes of many of my colleagues and indeed the government, that the Trade and Cooperation Agreement says that vessel licences would be issued to vessels that previously worked in the area. I think it was between the years 2012-2016. They would be granted and they would be honoured. But what we've seen is a raft of applications from French vessels that never ever fished there in the hope that they could fish there if they wished. So in the past, they could have fished there, but they didn't. But now they're being ruled out. And if you look at the sort of French fishermen issue, it now sets men against men. Some have, some haven't. And I would suggest that that's part of the driver for this.
And the tragedy in all of this, I suppose, is that, fishing, not particularly well-paid industry, often in dangerous conditions, now facing fines for perhaps not having the correct administrative evidence when they're arriving in places and being impounded in foreign countries. It's unfair, many would say, on the people who have very little to do with Brexit themselves, that they're having to pay this price.
It is. I mean, I've been in a similar situation myself, locked in a Norwegian port when I was fishing for a living. It's not nice. I mean, the crew are well catered for. The skipper will be taken ashore. He'll receive some investigation into the case, and he'll put forward some evidence in his eyes what the rights and the wrongs are. But that vessel has a cargo on board. The crew will be paid a wage in accordance with the cargo. The cargo's on board. It's deteriorating in quality. So you're right in many respects that this vessel, this skipper, this crew is caught up in this situation where it's not of their making, and it's not of the UK's making. It's almost manufactured by the French to create a situation for political reasons. But I mean, I must say as well that the rhetoric causes ramifications even up here in Scotland, the northeast of Scotland. I mean, Macron is on about tighter checks at the border. Well, if the processors I'm not sure they're going to get the product to Europe, they won't buy it from the vessels. If they can't buy it from the vessels or buy it at a lesser price, then the crews up here get less money in their pocket as a result as well. So it just seems inherently wrong that you can turn an administrative issue into a massive political issue, which then has ripples all the way down through the chain to the small coastal communities that I represent.
And Mike, Scotland will feel the brunt of this, won't they? 5,000 people are employed as fishermen in Scotland. 40% of British fisheries are based in Scotland too. What are your concerns about this perhaps intensifying in the lead up to Christmas? Lots of people will want seafood on their Christmas dinner table, won't they?
They will. I mean, we feel aggrieved since the output of Brexit because we were promised a lot of things and got very little. So we now have less fish to catch than we did while we were a member of Europe. You're right in many respects that a lot of the products we catch, such as scallop, nephrops, monkfish, saithe, all goes across to the continent to the high-end restaurants at top price. And as we move towards Christmas, people are depending on that price spike. But if there's no surety in getting that to market, the people that buy from you look for it elsewhere, or they buy it cheaper from you because there's no security it's going to get to them in the condition they want it. Because seafood is a fresh product; it gets to the restaurants in the prime condition, and that condition deteriorates quite rapidly if a lorry is stuck at the channel for more than 12 hours, 24 hours. So it's a real precarious situation for our industry. And remember, our income was down 30% last year. So we're still trying to recover from a bad situation.
The Prime Minister very much trying to minimise this, isn't he? Of course, as he's in Rome this weekend, we're hearing that there's going to be a brush past between Emmanuel Macron and Prime Minister Boris Johnson because perhaps there's a few tensions there. What do you want the Prime Minister to do about this, and how do you see this whole thing being resolved?
Essentially, we'd like it de-escalated, because what we don't want to do is to go into Tuesday and some of these provisional licenses run out and we just get mayhem. That does no one any good. So we want it de-escalated. But, we can't, as a proud coastal state now, having spent years negotiating our exit, we can't just give everyone everything they want. It's the same, my members have been locked out of the Norwegian zone of the North Sea for 12 months now. We've been locked out of the Faroe zone for 12 months now. We just can't capitulate. And we need to find some narrative, some words that satisfies the French problem that they feel aggrieved and they're not getting what they want. Now, for me, that will be a narrative. It will be some come and go. They may get more licenses, but we can't give them everything they want, that's for sure.
Mike Park, really, really interesting to talk to you. Thank you so much. That is Mike Park, the Chief Executive of the Scottish White Fish Producers Association.
Coming up this morning, we'll be taking a look at your Saturday front pages with the journalist and broadcaster Claire Muldoon. That's up next. But first, here's your forecast with Helen Roberts.
Good morning. Unsettled is the theme for this weekend. After some exceptionally wet weather over recent days, we have further warnings for heavy rain in the forecast. And the reason things are quite so unsettled, this large area of low pressure has been sweeping weather fronts across the country in from the Atlantic, and some of those have been slow moving and some of those have been giving some really intense downpours. And this morning is no exception. Already some really heavy downpours have been affecting western and central areas. This weather front will continue to track its way east and northwards as we head through the day today. But we do have some improving conditions following on behind. So much brighter conditions following from the west through this afternoon, although always the risk of a few blustery showers. Temperature-wise, probably not far from where they should be at this time of year, but it will feel a little bit cooler than it has done over recent days. And we keep the clear skies into the first part of the night, but yet another weather front is waiting in the wings, and this one will gradually move in from the west through the early hours of Sunday morning, which is also, don't forget, when the clocks go back. So once again, it will be a very wet start to the day on Sunday morning, not dissimilar to Saturday, with some heavy downpours across western areas at first, and that band of rain once again gradually moving its way north and eastwards across the country. And again, there will be some brighter conditions following in from the west, but this time many more showers are likely, and some of those really will be heavy and quite likely thundery in places as well. So if you are planning to head out trick-or-treating on Sunday evening, do be prepared for some wet and windy weather, and certainly some showers are in the forecast. Now, as I mentioned, it remains unsettled right the way through the weekend and, in fact, into the start of next week, with further bands of rain heading our way as low pressure dominates the weather.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GBNews, 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday, called To The Point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the Channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
Hello again, it's coming up to 7:30. It's time to take a look at your Saturday morning front pages and start things, shall we, with The Guardian leading with that upcoming COP26 climate talk. Prime Minister Boris Johnson saying too many countries are still doing too little over climate change.
Last chance to save the planet splashes the eye weekend. In their exclusive interview with Boris Johnson ahead of the COP26 Climate Summit, the PM said it will be incredibly difficult to get a result. There has been progress and there are big commitments, he says.
Up next is The Times. China deals fresh blow to hopes of climate deal. China's appeared to rebuff Boris Johnson's plea to do more on climate change following their talks yesterday.
To the Daily Express now, and they feature another royal on their front page, Prince Charles, who has urged critical change to the way we live. The Prince of Wales will give the opening address at the COP26 summit in Glasgow on Monday.
The Independent also going heavy on climate change message. Its front page, very simple. It reads, "Time for action."
The Daily Telegraph today leads with the continuing row with France over fishing licences. French Prime Minister Jean Castex has said Britain must be shown that Brexit is damaging. He's written to European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen in an attempt to get EU allies to back his hardline stance against the EU.
Here's the FT weekend, also reporting on that fishing row with France. President Emmanuel Macron has warned that the UK's international reputation is in trial over disputes surrounding fishing rights.
The Queen has been told to rest for 2 weeks, the Mirror leading with the story that Her Majesty has been urged to rest for a further fortnight, meaning she will miss the Festival of Remembrance event.
And the Mail reporting on the Queen's new health fears as Buckingham Palace reveals Her Majesty's been ordered to cancel all public engagements and to only take on light desk-based duties.
The Mail reports on the Queen's new health fears as Buckingham Palace reveals Her Majesty...
got that one
we've got the second one there.
And let's finish with the Star then, shall we? Instead of a double whammy of the Mail, as always, something a little different for them. Apparently, the CIA has said Uri Geller's powers aren't fake and his spoon-bending trick is real. OK, and pigs might fly. The broadcaster and journalist Claire Muldoon is in the studio with us. She can take a deep dive into these stories. And we're going to talk, shall we, a little bit about the G20, of course, the world's most developed or fastest growing economies descending on Rome, of course, home of the Pope.
Home of the Pope, and President Biden had a meeting with the Pope yesterday with his wife Jill. Previous meetings that Biden has had with popes has been Saint now, John Paul II, and he had a 45-minute talk with him then. And at the time, the Pope's aides were like, look, we're running out of time, we need to keep this going. And the Pope was like, no, it's fine. And that was the longest meeting with a head of state with a papal Pope. Now, yesterday, 90 minutes the conversation was with them. And there's been a lot of reportage about it. We know that the Queen has been ordered to rest for 2 weeks. She is our head of state in this country. And when dignitaries meet heads of states, traditionally, they really ought not to discuss what was discussed. So therefore, for me as a practising quite devout Catholic, I was rather surprised to hear Biden come out and say, yep, I'm a good Catholic and I can continue to receive the Eucharist. Now, that perturbed me in quite a big sense because that takes us back to the 1973 ruling of Roe versus Wade. And that, of course, was the abortion ruling and the extent to which government can have a hold over women's choice. Traditionally, Democrats are for the Roe versus Wade and Republicans against it. And when Reagan was in power, he tried to timetable a change to try and overturn this, and it didn't happen. But the reason that I am continually stuck on this is that Biden has come out publicly and he said that he doesn't believe that life begins at conception. And as practising Catholics, we would say, Well, actually, it does, because it's not something that can start and stop. And therefore, we hold the religious faithful view that abortion is wrong. And also within that, then, if you believe that and if you have issues with this, then you are in a state of mortal sin, say, right? And you should not be in a state of grace to receive the Eucharist. So therefore, it troubles me to hear that he's a good Catholic and he can continue receiving the sacrament. This is very divisive. It's completely split the US Bishops' Synod in half. I'm not here to sit on judgment because that's not my job. I have views on things, and this is my view on this.
It's interesting because you're sitting here, and it's probably quite rare, and a lot of people at home won't particularly be interested in this, but all three of us are from Catholic backgrounds, coincidentally. And, you know, to me, if the Pope doesn't have a problem with something, then, you know, I don't have a problem with it, you know. So, you know, if the Pope says the President of the United States can still receive the sacrament of the Eucharist, then...
But does he, Isabel? That's the thing, because we really ought not to have heard any reporting on that. It's a very, very private thing.
Yeah, very interesting. Well, are they the only two that are meeting at the G20, or is the Pope meeting anyone else?
Well, he's not going to Glasgow, unfortunately, and he's just set up this synodal pathway for all the parishes in all of the world to get together with everybody, regardless of faith, to come together and give them their experiences of the Catholic faith. So that's something that will be done.
Tell you what, it'd be interesting to see what the Pope thinks about Boris and Carrie getting married in the Catholic cathedral, because, of course, Boris having been married previously. Anyway, let's not get into it.
Let's not get into that, because you know my views on that one as well.
What else have you found?
OK, well, the Eye have got a great trilogy of education at the moment. So I'm going to bring you to the first bit, which is the budget that Rishi Sunak announced, obviously, last week, that he's investing £1.8 billion into the education system in England and Wales. And that equates to £1,500 per pupil, which has gone back to 2010 funding rates. And I know that, well, my children now have left secondary education, apart from my son, he's in upper sixth. But the impact that had on the local schools here in West London, Sacred Heart and Hammersmith and the London Oratory, well, for a few, it was across the board, they struggled with the pupil performance premium, I think it is, that was cut from all the budgets. And you know, sometimes these budget cuts rely on payment of staff, and if they can't, I mean, even I think that every single member of staff that puts together a school is equally as important as others, from the cleaners, the caterers, to the support staff, and the head teachers and the teaching staff themselves. Everyone is hugely important in the running of schools, in the running of our children's education. So therefore, I think to invest in education is of the utmost priority to get social mobility moving. And on that, this October traditionally is the end of the Oxbridge applications for every subject. But the 15th of October is the end for veterinary, medicine, dentistry, across the board for most universities. So we've just gone through that pathway now. And the Eye report that there's a jump of 8% of families from socio-economic deprived backgrounds actually applying. And I think this is great news. And I think with the pupil premium, for the premium that is in place at the moment, we need to increase that. We need to have greater diversity. We need to have better socio-economic movement in this country, and indeed all countries, in order for us as a society to take each other forward and move on. But then thirdly, so we've got this great news happening on this side, but then what happens when you come out of the funnel? What happens when you come out of tertiary education?
Yeah, £70,000
in England and Wales, girls, because of course Scotland has free tertiary education. But, and this is the thing that I'm really concerned about, these young people now, post-23 onwards, coming out of university, maybe on the second rung of their graduate job, they will be earning salaries of 25, 27, 30k, right, about 24, 25. They have already started to pay off their student loan, which has already got interest in it. But then you've got the other ones coming through now. They want to
problem.
debate from 27,000 down to 23,000, and they've also got the tax on the healthcare for them, so they're taxed both ways.
Who would be a student these days? Look, we're almost out of time. I just want to squeeze in a quick word about, of course, Halloween tomorrow, and of course the clock's changing tonight.
So we've got an hour extra of guys here tomorrow. Okay, we're all used to masks now. There's no excuse, girls. Get your mask on, get out, get trick or treating, and then you've got an extra hour to do it.
We've both got our houses covered in spiderweb.
We have.
Spiders,
We have.
We scary, but you said very much going to have your lights off. Bah humbug. No trick-or-treaters at Muldoon household tomorrow. Look, lovely to have you in. Thanks for coming in to join us on the Great British Breakfast. Stay with us here. We'll have lots more for you. We're here all the way until 10.
Yeah, still to come this hour, Rhiannon Jones will be here to take you through the biggest stories from the world of sport. That's next.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GBNews.
Join us for Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GBNews.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday. Call to the point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the Channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday right here on GB News for To The Point.
It's 22. That means it's time for the sport. Here's Rhiannon Jones.
Thank you, Isabel. There are 7 games in the Premier League today, but the big one takes place in North London this evening as Tottenham Hotspur and Manchester United are in action. Their Spurs side has lost twice in their last 3 games, but they were successful in the League Cup against Burnley earlier in the week. Tottenham head coach Nuno Espirito Santo was asked if his side could exploit the situation at United.
We'll have a plan. We'll prepare it. We have a training session, and then we have a minute and a meeting, and we have a plan. And we'll try to reproduce that plan. But like I say, and I respect what I'm trying to say to you, I will not mention anything regarding the situation of our opponents. We look at them as a football team.
There's an intriguing match-up in the early kick-off as 2 of the form teams go head-to-head. Arsenal, unbeaten in their last 8, face Leicester City. They haven't lost since September. The top 3 are all in action at 3 o'clock. Liverpool are at home to Brighton and Manchester City host Crystal Palace. They're both chasing leaders Chelsea, who are away at Newcastle. Meanwhile, Burnley face Brentford and Southampton go to Watford. In the Championship, it's second against third at lunchtime as Fulham take on West Brom at Craven Cottage. Last night, Jack Colback struck a 91st-minute equaliser at Nottingham Forest as they drew 1-1 at QPR. Scotland international Lyndon Dykes had opened the scoring. It's Colback's first league goal since March 2019. In Scotland, Celtic have the chance to go top of the league for the first time in a year as they welcome Livingston to Parkhead. They meet at 3. Current leaders Rangers are in action tomorrow against Motherwell. And if Celtic slip up, Hearts, who are away to Aberdeen, and Dundee United, who are at home to St Johnstone, well, they could both leapfrog Celtic. Meanwhile, Hibs are away to bottom club Ross County, and St Mirren face Dundee. To rugby now, and New Zealand-born Gareth Anscombe will make his first Wales start since 2019 when they face the All Blacks in Cardiff later. Wales head coach Wayne Pivac also faces his home country, and a particularly special game for him as his family, who he's not seen for the last few years, well, they'll be watching.
It honestly feels like home here because I can't get into the other country. So for me, we've been here for 2 years now. You don't see your family, haven't seen them for 2 years. So I know they'll be supporting and they'll be watching, of course they will. But I guess with me doing the role I'm doing, there's a lot of friends and family back there and a lot around the globe that are supporting Wales now. So look, we just want to do well for people in Wales and people from outside of Wales that are supporting us.
Meanwhile, in the Premiership, Exeter launched a second-half fight-back and then survived a late Gloucester assault to win 16-13 at Kingsholm. Exeter trailed by 7 points before second-half tries from Alec Hepburn and Will Whitty secured a narrow win. Leaders Leicester are away to Northampton in one of 4 fixtures this afternoon. England's cricketers will be hoping to maintain their perfect start to the T20 World Cup this afternoon when they take on Australia. Owen Morgan's side sit top of Group 1 after 2 games in the Super 12s. They've already beaten holders West Indies and Bangladesh.
It's probably going to be one of our most difficult games in this group stage. Australia are a very strong side. They've gone 2 from 2, very much like us, and have started the tournament well. I think one thing that we'll be most proud of so far is our level of performance and intensity has been pretty good in the 2 games that we've played. Obviously, the challenge is continuing that for our next 3 games in pursuit of getting through to that next phase of the tournament.
England's Bronte Law secured her first Ladies European Tour title with victory at the Dubai Moonlight Classic. She produced an impressive final round of 64 to edge a shot clear of Mexico's Maria Fassi at Emirates Golf Club. The 26-year-old played her last 8 holes in 6 under par thanks to an eagle and 4 birdies. Well, let's take a look now at what's making the headlines on the back pages, and I'm joined in the studio, as I am every Saturday, by sports broadcaster and Tottenham Hotspur superfan and celebrity Paul Coyte.
Wow.
Yeah. The GI running out of ways to introduce you. Let's start with.
Can I apologise first?
Oh, yes,
about
please do.
my prediction for Liverpool-Manchester United.
Yeah,
I
last
was absolutely
weekend.
certain it was going to be 0-0. OK, so I'd apologise. So I just
you were
get it out
close.
there before you probably get it in there.
Spurs United,
yes.
Rapidly becoming known as El Sacchio.
I know. It's probably more Sacchio towards Manchester United than it is towards Spurs because of Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. I mean, is he a dead man walking? Is it as bad as that? I think it probably isn't far off. There's been the point, and I've been very much behind him all along, and I think I really like nice people as well, and he always seems like a very decent man, and also he showed a lot of character as well, which also says a lot. After the game, he would still go out there and he would speak to fans and he would sign things. So he's got a lot of character. He's a very decent man, but is it working for him as a football manager? I think the answer we all know is no. He's pulled games out of the bag before, where it looks like his back's against the wall and things are turned around. Spurs is probably going to be not a bad game to be able to play against because you don't know what you're going to get. You don't know what you're going to get with Manchester United, and you don't know what you're going to get with Spurs either. So it really is that's why I'm not going to actually predict this one at all.
But
go on, OK, 2-2, 6-0, 3-7. It really could be anything. But El Sacchio, because Nuno Nuno Espirito Santo, who's also maybe...
pronunciation, Paul.
He's very quietly, and he never gives very much away, as we saw in the interview there. Very close to his... But
pressure also on him.
I think so. I don't think anywhere near as much pressure as there is on Ollie. Manchester United expect. And by now, things should be working for him. You know, he's, of course, with the signings that he's got. Spurs is a different kettle of fish altogether. You know, it's that transition thing, and we can say that about so many clubs, but it is with Spurs. And as far as Nuno goes, I think Spurs have just got to give him, and fans have just got to give him time. I mean, I remember speaking to Mauricio Pochettino, this is when and also the players around him, when he took over at Spurs, and players were saying, you know, I've got to be honest with you, I don't know how to deal with this because it's completely different, and we're not used to it, so it's going to take time to settle in, but we'll see. What
do you make of Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's calling on his team to fight back like Tyson Fury? What do you make of that?
I think what he's saying is the fact that Tyson Fury would get knocked down, and which has happened against Deontay Wilder, get knocked down, I think it's turning into a song, and then get back up again, and they're never going to... Anyway, so he would then come back and he would fight back. Whereas the game is at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, and the last fight there was Anthony Joshua, and that didn't go so well. So maybe the fighting analogies are probably not the right thing. I can see what he's saying. Yeah. But I think he's just trying everything he possibly can. But
oh, I've got that song going around in my head now.
I'm so sorry.
And they're already lining up managers on our back pages. Brendan Rodgers has been mentioned.
Of course, because he's always mentioned. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what vacancy there is in the Premier League. Brendan Rodgers is always going to be mentioned. I think it's... See, I always hate talking about, new managers before the other manager's gone, because, again, I just think but it's just obvious that this is going to happen. Yeah. So I think Antonio Conte, who I also mentioned probably would be great for Newcastle. Now you look at Manchester United, that really is going to be the fit. And if they're going to go for anybody, I think that's who it's going to be. But we'll see how today goes against Spurs. Then they've got Atalanta again. They've got to play Manchester City. These are all really difficult games. So if Ollie lasts those three, I think it'll be OK. But I think it's going to be tough to last those three.
I want to talk about Emma Raducanu, because despite the loss, she's still making the back pages, just proving how big she is. Yeah. She lost in Transylvania. Yeah. Did she get spooked?
You know what? I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think I'm the only person that keeps mentioning that. Do they realise in Transylvania that it's Halloween? Is there any link between the Transylvania Open and Halloween? See, apparently she wanted to play in daylight, and it was unfortunate, you know. And I think it was in the second set where there were like little two red marks. I don't know.
What do you make of her at the moment? Because she's looking for a coach.
She is.
Do you think that we need to be a little bit more patient, as she keeps asking us to be with her?
It's understandable. For someone of 18 to go out and win the US Open as she did, which was remarkable, there's always going to be, this big build-up, then there's going to be a little fall, and then a build-up again. So it's another thing in sport. We've seen it in teams, we've seen it in loads of different sports, whereas they appear... Then there's a drop, and when this is where the real test of character comes, is then where do we go from here? But these aren't majors. I mean, we're heading to Wimbledon next year, and then of course the Australian Open, which is coming up around Christmas time or January. So by then, hopefully she'll be okay.
And hopefully she will have found a coach by then. Just quickly, very quickly, T20 World Cup. Oh, it's a juicy one. England, Australia.
England, Australia today. This is a really important game. We're getting towards the knockout stage in the semi-finals. It's a game that England need to win. They've looked really good so far. But in T20, this is the thing. You don't only need to be great, but you need the luck. You need to have the luck go with you. You need to play great. It needs to go well. It's a very short form of the game. So I'm a little nervous.
You always are,
but always excited.
Thank you very much, Paul, as ever. That's all the sport from us. Back to breakfast. We'll see you in just under an hour's time.
Rhiannon Jones there with today's top sports headlines. Thanks, Rhiannon. Let's take a look at what is happening away from the world of sport. Boris Johnson has arrived in Rome ahead of the annual G20 meeting. There, he'll urge leaders of the world's biggest economies to cut damaging carbon emissions. His comments come ahead of the UK hosting the COP26 climate conference, which opens on Monday.
The Prime Minister has vowed to do whatever is necessary to ensure UK interests are protected in the row with France over fishing licences. This comes as Emmanuel Macron has accused the UK of not showing credibility on Brexit. Both leaders are due to talk later today at the G20 Summit.
Lawyers for Prince Andrew have asked a New York judge to throw out a civil lawsuit brought against him. They're seeking to dismiss the claims brought by Virginia Giuffre, who accuses the Duke of York of sexually abusing her when she was 17. The royal unequivocally denies sexually assaulting or abusing her.
And here's your weekend forecast. Rain, heavy at times over parts of England, Scotland and Wales. It will slowly clear away eastwards and sunny spells will follow, but heavy showers for some, and they will be mainly in the south and the west. OK, the time is coming up to 10 to 8. Let's take a look at some of the biggest finance stories today with the business and finance commentator Michael Wilson. Hello again, Michael. We're talking about UK-registered companies this morning and financial institutions that will now have to make various climate-related disclosures in this climate-obsessed time that we live.
Legally by next April. At the moment, it's just name and shame. I think that what is happening generally is that I don't think you can legislate for this kind of thing. A lot of companies will say publicly, yes, we are doing a great deal. Privately, they'll be saying, so what? What's going to happen? We have a duty to shareholders and all the rest of it. I'm sorry, but that's the reality of life. However, some of those shareholders are now thinking that they ought to be concerned about companies that they invest in. Ought to be concerned about climate change. And so we're gradually seeing that moving. I don't think much will happen as a result of what's coming up over the next weeks, this COP26. But this is a leftover from COP21, which took place in 2015 in Paris, which is where there was some kind of move to get corporate Europe and corporate globally really to say what they're actually doing and how they're trying to absorb and also correct climate change if possible. But I think that there's a slight push from shareholders right now, and that's really, if you're going to get change, that's where it's going to come from.
It's interesting you mentioned, was it COP21 there? There have been 25 previous COPs and we have never really heard quite as much as we have about this one because, of course, it is a domestically hosted event. But do you think that, 26 is going to be the one, or are we perhaps, as we've been discussing a little bit earlier, just a little bit pie in the sky, given that some of the biggest players or the biggest, guiltiest parties aren't even attending?
I think you're right, absolutely. I mean, that's the problem, isn't it? If you're not getting China there and you're not getting cooperation from Russia. I mean, Russia talks up a big game. I think there's more rhetoric than actual power. But China is a whole different ballgame and a big, powerful economy. And if you've been looking at it, as I have over the past couple of weeks, what they've been doing is rapidly trying to import coal, for example, to keep their energy crisis from becoming an ongoing crisis. And they're not allowed to import that from Australia right now because they have a self-imposed ban on importing Australian coal, which is the world's biggest coal exporter. So they're importing it from Russia. So really, all these things are going on. And is India going to stop its move towards being an advanced industrialized country by not using coal? I doubt it very much indeed. So they can talk as much as they like, but the financial reality is that these countries want to get to developed country kind of level. And if it involves using fossil fuels, then so be it, and they will.
Michael, let's talk about the collapse of Bulb, which was Britain's 7th biggest domestic energy supplier. And the government is now accelerating contingency plans for it, aren't they?
They are. I mean, this is 1.7 million people who subscribe or are customers of Bulb. What tends to happen is that Ofgem is empowered to find all these people an alternative, so they won't actually be cut off from energy. If Bulb fails. So far, no particular buyers have been found. You have to say, when buyers actually look at this, the head of Energy UK said last month, she said, this is a business, this is a whole business plan, a whole business sector, which is not fit for purpose because, quite simply, official caps are making it unprofitable to be in this kind of business. And unless you are a power company with its own wind farms, which very few have, then what are you going to do? So no surprise, I feel as unfortunately what's going to happen is that the people who are at Bulb, presumably because they were getting energy at a good price, are going to be dumped on another employer, another supplier. There are going to be fewer suppliers. Obviously, prices are going to go up. The people will be paying more for energy.
And Michael, just a final thought on this new research that shows commuter journeys on Britain's railways remain at less than half of pre-pandemic levels, despite, of course, more journeys taking place.
The truth about train companies, they have to run crowded trains at commuter times. If they don't do that, they don't make any money. That's number one. Number two, they've got this campaign about let's get back on track. I'd alter that to let's stand all the way, because that's what you're going to get. I don't think people want that anymore. I think that whatever the pandemic has showed is you can work from home. More and more people are doing that. They're maybe going more off peak. Those leisure is about, I think, 90% of capacity. Certainly wasn't the train I caught yesterday. It was absolutely jam-packed, but this was outside the rush hour. So I think that what people are doing is they're working more from home and not going on train. Plus, tickets are very, very expensive. And as if you're commuting and a season ticket as well, and you're coming in from any distance, as a lot of people do, coming into city centres for any kind of distance, they are very expensive indeed. So there's lots not going for the train companies right now.
Yeah, it's so true. And of course, you're always up close with the other passengers as well. People like you, Michael, who are eating really stinky cheese and onion crisps. You don't have that problem when you're in your own car, do you? We have to leave it there. Lovely to see you again tomorrow morning. Look, we've been asking you at home to get in touch this morning on the issues we've been discussing throughout the programme. Obviously, our top story is the G20 that's starting in Rome today. What have people been saying?
Yes, we've been asking, as the world leaders are arriving in Rome, what issues should they be discussing? Well, Scott thinks they should discuss how to step down and resign with dignity, the whole lot of them.
Oh, yeah, I'm glad you edited out the word that they described them as there. Gianna says they're missing the key problem with the climate crisis. The key problem for her, she says, is overpopulation. Very interesting point there.
I like this one. One viewer expects them to discuss what time lunch is, what's on the menu, and who has the champagne, the important questions.
Mark thinks they should consider slowing down the pace of decarbonisation in the West before we cripple ourselves, whilst the East just carry on as they're gaining more and more advantage. Persuade them to get off their backsides and join the fight.
Charlie says they should discuss the effectiveness of any of this without China at the table. Yes, that's what a lot of people are thinking, aren't they? The biggest polluter is not actually at the table for the G20 conversation. So what can actually come of it?
Yeah, this one about Prince Charles. One viewer commenting, Prince Charles's decades of experience talking to plants and vegetables does rather make him the ideal British delegate to be able to chit-chat at length with President Biden about a major diplomatic incident arising. That is, of course, because Prince Charles is attending in Rome, representing the UK's interests, and he's opening COP26 as well, isn't he, on Monday? Thank you for your views. Keep them coming in. Lots more for you. Got 2 more hours of the Great British Breakfast this morning. Coming up in the next hour, we'll be talking about the Queen's being advised by her doctors to rest for the following 2 weeks. The royal expert Ingrid Seward will be talking to us more about this.
And we'll also be joined by Harry Redknapp to look ahead at today's big game as Tottenham take on Manchester United.
Good morning. Unsettled is the theme for this weekend. After some exceptionally wet weather over recent days, we have further warnings for heavy rain in the forecast. And the reason things are quite so unsettled, this large area of low pressure has been sweeping weather fronts across the country in from the Atlantic, and some of those have been slow moving and some of those have been giving some really intense downpours. And this morning is no exception. Already some really heavy downpours have been affecting western and central areas. This weather front will continue to track its way east and northwards as we head through the day today. But we do have some improving conditions following on behind. So much brighter conditions following from the west through this afternoon, although always the risk of a few blustery showers. Temperature-wise, probably not far from where they should be at this time of year, but it will feel a little bit cooler than it has done over recent days. And we keep the clear skies into the first part of the night, but yet another weather front is waiting in the wings, and this one will gradually move in from the west through the early hours of Sunday morning, which is also, don't forget, when the clocks go back. So once again, it will be a very wet start to the day on Sunday morning, not dissimilar to Saturday, with some heavy downpours across western areas at first, and that band of rain once again gradually moving its way north and eastwards across the country. And again, there will be some brighter conditions following in from the west, but this time many more showers are likely, and some of those really will be heavy and quite likely thundery in places as well. So if you are planning to head out trick-or-treating on Sunday evening, do be prepared for some wet and windy weather, and certainly some showers are in the forecast. Now, as I mentioned, it remains unsettled right the way through the weekend and, in fact, into the start of next week, with further bands of rain heading our way as low pressure dominates the weather.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GBNews.
Join us for Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GBNews.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday, called To The Point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the Channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
Very good morning to you. It's 8 o'clock. You're waking up to the Great British Breakfast here on GB News with Ellie Costello and with me, Isabel Webster. And these are the stories that matter this Saturday, the 30th of October.
The annual G20 Summit gets underway today. Leaders from the 20 countries with the largest and fastest growing economies are convening in Rome to discuss climate change, among other things. GB News is travelling with the Prime Minister and we'll have updates for you throughout the morning.
Boris Johnson's promised to do whatever is necessary to ensure UK interests over the fishing licences dispute with France. But while the Prime Minister claims Paris's behaviour could be in breach of the UK's Brexit deal with the EU, France's President Emmanuel Macron has suggested the UK has not kept its Brexit pledges. So who is in the right?
The Queen has been advised to rest for at least the next 2 weeks. Her doctors say she can undertake light desk-based duties but shouldn't make any official visits. But Her Majesty hopes to still be able to attend the National Service of Remembrance on Remembrance Sunday.
And while the world turns its attention to Glasgow and COP26, we've been speaking to local businesses around the UK to find out what they're doing to help the environment. Today we hear from a climate-positive net zero gin distillery in Cumbria.
Thank you so much for joining us. Well, over the next couple of days, we will see world leaders descend on the city of Glasgow as they prepare to meet for what some are saying are crucial climate talks at the COP26 event.
But before that kicks off on Monday, the likes of Australia's Scott Morrison, Canada's Justin Trudeau, Germany's Angela Merkel, and of course our very own Boris Johnson. They'll be sitting down with a long list of other PMs and presidents to discuss COVID-19 and the post-pandemic global recovery. They'll also be turning their heads towards climate change ahead of COP26, and Boris Johnson will use the two-day event to urge other countries to honour their commitments to cut damaging carbon emissions.
Now, if you're wondering what exactly is the G20, well, it's a series of high-level international talks by the world's wealthiest nations, which takes place annually. In turn, each nation gets to host the talks, and this year it's Italy in the driving seat.
So last night, a string of presidential planes touched down in Rome. One of them was the Prime Minister's aircraft. And one person who's travelling with the Prime Minister is our political editor, Darren McCaffrey. He is in Rome travelling with the Prime Minister, and he joins us this morning. Very good morning to you, Darren. A busy day ahead in Rome. Just give us a sense of what's on the agenda and how awkward, of course, it's going to be between Prime Minister Boris Johnson and Emmanuel Macron.
Yeah, indeed. Welcome. Good morning to Rome. We're outside the Colosseum here, where the Prime Minister has actually been visiting this morning, talking to us in the media, and indeed getting some very nice pictures taken. And it's interesting, isn't it? He's very much using, Isabel, the Colosseum and Rome as a kind of metaphor for what needs to be done when it comes to climate change and to COP. Starting, of course, tomorrow, and what he's trying to encourage leaders here at the G20 to do as well. And that is his big point, is that essentially climate change is a threat to our civilization. He argues that we've been here before with the fall of the Roman Empire, in which they thought that things would never change, that civilization would continue. And Boris Johnson's argument is that we may well feel like that in 2021, but actually climate change is a real threat to our civilization in the 21st century. His big target is to try and keep alive that target of 1.5% in terms of 1.5 degrees, in terms of global average temperatures, that they will not rise beyond that. Now, that looks very, very difficult, and the Prime Minister has admitted it is an incredibly difficult task, suggesting that if you look at it like a football game, we're halfway through and we're 5-1 down as humanity. Can we claw back in the second half? That's what he's trying to do with convincing leaders that they should commit more, that they should commit to becoming carbon neutral over the coming decades. But the big question is, Isabel, is that going to happen? Because frankly, India is not turning up to Glasgow, China is not turning up to Glasgow, Russia is not turning up to Glasgow, some of the world's biggest emitters of carbon dioxide. And that is why the Prime Minister has got a mammoth task ahead of him. And as you say, it all begins here at the G20 in Rome, where he's meeting those world leaders, trying to set the scene for that really important climate change conference.
OK, Darren, thank you very much. And of course, the whole sort of political press pack will be following from the G20 to COP26. You, of course, travelling on the Prime Minister's plane. Just a word about Carrie Johnson. She's on her first foreign trip this time.
Yes, she is indeed, and she accompanied the Prime Minister off the plane last night. She will, of course, be with the spouses and the partners of other world leaders, as often happens at these kind of global events. They go off and do their own thing while the leaders themselves sit around and talk about stuff. I think one other thing we should talk about as well, though, Isabel, is clearly France and the row that we saw with fisheries there. Now, the Prime Minister made it clear yesterday on the plane on the way over that he was prepared to do, he argued, whatever it takes to try and defend British interests. Of course, there is this row and this war of words, if you like, with France overfishing and the licences that both British and French trawlermen have been given. We know that one boat had been impounded essentially by the French this week, with the French ambassador being called into the Foreign Office as well. And it does seem that, this is a pretty bitter dispute in many words. Overnight, Emmanuel Macron gave an interview to the Financial Times questioning essentially the credibility of Britain, whether it was breaking some of the Brexit rules, and even today suggestions that the UK may well take further action next week, bringing this to the EU's attention, that they think France essentially are in the wrong. And it is a reminder, I think, isn't it, in many ways, Isabel, that, even though kind of Brexit's done to a degree. This ongoing relationship between France and the UK, between EU countries and the UK, is not sorted, and there are going to be these areas of tension time and time again. And fishery is a key kind of political issue for both the French and the British. And at the moment, it's pretty clear that war of words and those difficulties aren't going to go anytime soon.
And of course, you know, for Prime Minister Boris Johnson ahead of COP26, it's not great timing to be having this. He'll be keen to smooth things away, won't he, with this brush pass later on. But of course, for Emmanuel Macron domestically, he wants to, I suppose, ramp it up a little bit because there are elections there in 6 months. But there will be other things on the agenda today, won't there, Ellie?
Yes, we're going to be talking about the failure to tackle global vaccine inequality. There's been calls, haven't there, Darren, for the G20 Summit to address that. What are we expecting to hear about the vaccine monopoly? We've heard and Harry come out and speak about it. It's certainly a hot topic.
Yeah, it really is. First of all, you're right in saying that, of course, Emmanuel Macron and Boris Johnson are going to meet. Also on the agenda today is Iran and that nuclear deal. President Biden holding talks, I think, with people like Angela Merkel, Emmanuel Macron and Boris Johnson on that. We know Prince Charles also, I should have said, is here as well, talking about climate change. But also on vaccines, we've seen this letter from a whole range of former world leaders, including the former British Prime Minister Gordon Brown, saying that the world needs to act now by essentially sending millions and millions of vaccines that we have in the West to many developing countries across the world. We've got vaccination rates of around 70-80% of the population in the UK, in France, Italy, the United States. That is not the case in many parts, particularly of sub-Saharan Africa and parts of Asia, where vaccination rates are only 2, 3, 4%. And Gordon Brown's former world leaders' plea is to the leaders meeting here in Rome today is that if you've got extra vaccines, particularly those that might go out of date soon, you should start exporting them to those countries. You know, that narrative that we hear time and time again is that this pandemic will only be over when the world is vaccinated, that we cannot just rely on vaccinating ourselves.
Yeah, indeed. OK, Darren, thank you. I know you've got a busy day. We'll let you go and catch up with you again a little bit later on.
Well, one very important person will be missing from Glasgow on Monday. The Queen will not attend COP26 as she's been advised to rest for 2 weeks by her doctors. This latest development comes after she cancelled a 2-day trip to Northern Ireland last week and underwent tests in hospital.
Well, the Queen will not be attending the Festival of Remembrance on Saturday, the 13th of November. However, it remains her firm intention to be present for the National Service of Remembrance on the Sunday. The 95-year-old monarch is said to be in good spirits and during Friday afternoon recorded her COP26 speech for the United Nations Climate Change Conference, which opens in Glasgow on Monday. And I'm delighted to say we can speak to the royal correspondent, Ingrid Stewart, to analyse all of this. Very good morning to you, Ingrid. Look, first of all, the palace didn't really want to let on that Her Majesty was ill. Then we were told it was a few days. Now it's been extended to a couple of weeks. How worrying is this?
Well, I think anyone of her age is going to have various medical problems. I mean, it would be quite extraordinary if there was nothing, absolutely nothing wrong with her at all. We know that she's had an operation on her knee. We know that for most of her life, you know, most certainly most of her reign, she spent a huge amount of time standing for very long periods. It could be anything. The palace just don't give anything away medically. And traditionally, with previous monarchs, they have been a little bit more open. But this is probably the wish of the Queen. She doesn't want anyone to, you know, to get sort of really fraught by what might be wrong with her. But it might be nothing. She might just be suffering from exhaustion, and our doctors are taking extra care with her because they don't want to, you know, for her to actually get ill. So it could be nothing or it could be something, but we absolutely are not being given any clues on this at all, which is why I suppose the story goes on.
Yeah, well, exactly. And isn't that the point, I suppose, that is, you know, as it goes on and, you know, as we know, her firm intention is to be there for Remembrance Sunday. But if that gets delayed or whatever, the palace will surely have to tell us what is wrong, because in the absence of facts grows speculation. And it's better just to say, even though, of course, they have to walk this fine path between Her Majesty's privacy, which, of course, she's entitled to. But there is always, naturally, great concern for her, not just here, but all around the world.
Absolutely. Well, she, besides being monarch, she is head of state. So I think people feel that they have a right to know about her health. But I think that the palace, it's really up to the Queen and her immediate advisors. I mean, the press office at the palace probably know about as much as you and I do. So it's really up to the Queen what she decides that she would like people to know. And you don't really want people to know what's wrong with you, especially if it's nothing terribly serious. So I think it'll be a sort of day by day assumption of what's going to happen. I don't think we're going to see anything very long term at the moment.
Good morning to you. This is uncharted territory, isn't it, really, for the royals, given how long the Queen has reigned? I mean, we are speaking about a 95-year-old woman here. Do you think we are now going to see more and more of Charles stepping up to the plate? Charles, more falling on Charles's shoulders and taking on more and more responsibility?
Well, we certainly, over the past year, we have seen much more of this. And of course, Charles is ready to do this. I mean, he's been waiting most of his life to do this. And he will be saying to his mother, look, let me do this. And he's already opening the COP26, which is what the Queen was going to do. She's recorded a message, as you said. So I don't think we are expecting too much of her. I think we've always expected a great deal of her, and she wants to give it. She has said constantly that, if she stops, she drops, which is a wonderful old-fashioned expression, because I think she feels she just wants to get on with things, and she hates letting people down. And her whole life is being dedicated to duty, and she sees this as her duty. But obviously her children will be saying, steady on. We can't afford for you to get seriously ill, so just rest. But it's very difficult for someone to rest when they're used to being so active all their life. It's something that doctors are always fighting with people of her age. Not that there are that many people of her age. I mean, Sir David Attenborough, who is also going to be at COP26, is actually a month younger than the Queen.
Two absolute crown jewels, aren't they, to use the expression?
They are,
but
yes.
Look, in terms of Her Majesty, she's said that she wants to be at Remembrance Sunday. Was that wise to make that public, that it was her firm intention? Because, of course, there'll be huge concern if that doesn't happen. And, also does it speak volumes, I suppose, about, what she places value on? Because there's, of course, the wartime generation. Remembrance Sunday, hugely important to her.
I'm sure that she will, and, unless she's... Well, I would think she would be at Remembrance Sunday because, going to the Albert Hall for the Festival of Remembrance, there's lots and lots of people. I mean, at least on Remembrance Sunday, she's standing on a balcony, just with her immediate family. I mean, I think they're probably what her medical team are worried about is of her catching something if she's in a weakened state. So let's hope that she will be there on Remembrance Sunday, and I'm sure if she physically can, she will.
Meanwhile, Ingrid, we're hearing that Prince Andrew has asked a New York court to dismiss legal action brought against him by Virginia Giuffre, claims that he completely denies. Has there been any comment from the palace on that development? And also, of course, we're all thinking about that additional stress on the Queen.
Well, the news that has broken today about Prince Andrew, his lawyers had to get his deposition through by yesterday, and it's in all the online and probably the late editions of the newspapers today. And his lawyers have actually turned the case round so that Virginia Giuffre, who's the lady that is accusing him, he is now accusing her of basically, his lawyers have said it's payday for her. She is really after the money. She's also been accused of working with Ghislaine Maxwell as a sort of, I suppose you could say, a sort of mini madam. So she's also been accused of sort of, I suppose, trafficking her friends, young girls, into the Epstein stable. And, they're all going there to, to make money. So in a nutshell, what Andrew's lawyers are saying is that, she's decided to pick Andrew because he's very high profile. They still insist that he is totally innocent. And it's a very strong case that they've put, but we still don't know exactly what's going to happen. But this is quite positive, and at last they've actually said something. And I think this is probably positive, for the Queen too. I mean, that must have been incredibly worrying for her, her favourite son in this terrible situation. And at least he has now put his case forward. And it now remains to see what will happen, what the American judge will say.
Indeed, there was a stage when we thought he may say nothing. So an interesting development there. Ingrid Stewart, always good to see you on the Great British Breakfast. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
In other news today, and commuter journeys on Britain's railways is 45% of what it was before the start of the coronavirus crisis. That's according to industry body the Rail Delivery Group, who say the number of train journeys made by people travelling to or from work in mid-October was less than half of pre-pandemic levels.
Well, although this new data represents an increase from 33% in late August, it highlights the difficulty that railways are facing as many people continue to work from home. London's seen the slowest recovery in commuting journeys in all of Britain.
Well, Seb Gordon is the Director of Communications at the Rail Delivery Group. He joins us now. Good morning to you, Seb. Is this data surprising to you?
I don't think it's wildly surprising. I think we expect people to
Oh, Seb, I think we're having a few problems hearing you. We'll just check if you are all plugged in and able to establish comms there. We are hoping to talk a little bit in a moment too, Seb, about the fact that fewer of us are using trains post-pandemic than before, perhaps related to concerns over catching the virus. Who knows? We'll talk to Seb. We're going to sort out comms with him. We're going to take a break and we'll be back in just a moment.
Good morning. Unsettled is the theme for this weekend. After some exceptionally wet weather over recent days, we have further warnings for heavy rain in the forecast. And the reason things are quite so unsettled, this large area of low pressure has been sweeping weather fronts across the country in from the Atlantic, and some of those have been slow moving and some of those have been giving some really intense downpours. And this morning is no exception. Already some really heavy downpours have been affecting western and central areas. This weather front will continue to track its way east and northwards as we head through the day today. But we do have some improving conditions following on behind. So much brighter conditions following from the west through this afternoon, although always the risk of a few blustery showers. Temperature-wise, probably not far from where they should be at this time of year, but it will feel a little bit cooler than it has done over recent days. And we keep the clear skies into the first part of the night, but yet another weather front is waiting in the wings, and this one will gradually move in from the west through the early hours of Sunday morning, which is also, don't forget, when the clocks go back. So once again, it will be a very wet start to the day on Sunday morning, not dissimilar to Saturday, with some heavy downpours across western areas at first, and that band of rain once again gradually moving its way north and eastwards across the country. And again, there will be some brighter conditions following in from the west, but this time many more showers are likely, and some of those really will be heavy and quite likely thundery in places as well. So if you are planning to head out trick-or-treating on Sunday evening, do be prepared for some wet and windy weather, and certainly some showers are in the forecast. Now, as I mentioned, it remains unsettled right the way through the weekend and, in fact, into the start of next week, with further bands of rain heading our way as low pressure dominates the weather.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday, called To The Point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the Channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about rail travel in the UK, and journeys made by people travelling to or from work in mid-October were less than half of pre-pandemic levels. That's according to industry body, the Rail Delivery Group. And we were trying to speak to the Director of Communications at the group, Seb Gordon, who hopefully joins us now. I think we've just reconnected with you, Seb. Good morning again.
Hi, good morning.
Asking you, we can hear you now. That's fantastic. We
Brilliant.
were asking you if this data was surprising to you, considering that more and more people are working from home or working flexibly.
I don't think it is too surprising to us. We expect to see people starting to return to the train after the summer holiday. We knew that that would probably be the time after kids go back to school and the pandemic had sort of abated and people getting vaccinated, that people would start to think about. And I think we always knew that leisure travel was going to rebound a lot quicker than commuting. So as I heard you talking about earlier, leisure travel is back around 90% of where it was pre-pandemic, and that's fantastic. Commuting is proving slower to recover. And I think what's happening there is probably a combination of things. One of the biggest factors, ultimately, that employers aren't yet sort of demanding, understandably, sort of head back to the office. I think people are still finding their way. Am I going back in once? Am I going back twice? Am I going back 3 times a week? Am I going back in not at all? So I think commuting is going to be a lot longer before we know really where things are going to go.
Well, do the figures bear that out, Seb? Because my understanding is that roads, certainly here in London, are busier than they were pre-pandemic. And it seems to me that people who are already going back to work are just choosing to go in a different way. And I assume that's to do with concerns perhaps about the virus, not wanting to be up close with people, or just preferring to go in their car.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen those figures as well. I'm not sure that is quite the case, because I think often people who commute by rail, I live in London, people who commute by rail aren't really going to commute by car. I work, I'm going to take central London rush hour.
Do you know,
I'm not sure that...
I'm sorry, we're just not hearing enough of the quality's just not good enough, I'm afraid. Look, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much anyway. A really interesting discussion point. Let us know if you are a commuter. Are you choosing to go in your car instead of on the train? And what's your reason for that, if that is you? Or is it just simply perhaps because, as Seb was saying, people are increasingly working from home in our new normal? Let's move on to a different story now. And Northern Ireland is still continuing to open up from lockdown, slowly doing away with COVID restrictions, perhaps the slowest corner of the UK. This weekend sees the return of crowds to horse racing, of course, a very popular sport in the region.
Yeah, thousands of fans were welcomed back to the races for the first time since the start of the pandemic. Our Northern Ireland reporter Dougie Beattie has just been one of the spectators watching the action at the Down Royal Racecourse.
Northern Ireland is lifting the covers off the last of its economic COVID restrictions. The national hunt season has got underway, and this is the first time the horse racing in Northern Ireland has opened its doors to spectators.
Well, the Northern Ireland Festival of Racing, the Ladbrokes Festival of Racing, is the flagship 2-day in any calendar year, but it's just, we're delighted that we can actually reprise it with public en masse. It's been, 18 months of a behind closed doors model, only opening up this year with a small marginal layer in of public back. So we're just delighted to welcome everyone back for what is our showcase two-day festival. We have to respect that it has been a global pandemic. We're certainly not out of the woods yet, but yet we want to continue on this trajectory by having people en masse attend the races. So we have a three-pronged approach to criteria in terms of attendance, which includes proof of proof that one is doubly vaccinated, if not a negative lateral flow, and then a negative PCR test to show that they have the accumulative antibodies. Once they're admitted then, we're okay outdoors in Northern Ireland. There's no social distancing applying, but indoors the 1 metre rule applies, and obviously masks are the order of the day. So that's been invited by the Northern Ireland Executive. That's the tone has been set for that over the 2 days, and we have capped day 2 at 4,500 attending, just to make sure everybody has that level of comfortability. And obviously with restrictions in play, you know, we can make sure that everybody has a safe and enjoyable occasion.
Horse racing in Ireland is huge, and the money that flows around it helps so many other parts of the economy. The opening of the national hunt season right here also signifies the opening up of Northern Ireland's economy.
It's big. I mean, particularly racing is down to the grassroots. The sales went very well, the flat sales went well, the national hunt sales went well in May. You can see there's some money back in the industry, and that peppers down to the grassroots of the industry. For hospitality as well, I'm sure it's going to be a benefit to the local hostelries and bars and restaurants around here as well. Great to see crowds.
It's not only about the money though. The ability to enjoy and mingle with such events after 18 months is a social necessity.
I've had such a good day here, and it's not over yet. I can't wait for the rest of the day. I'm so excited. Rachel Blackman might have lost, but still, there's an whole day to go. I just need to win some money today now, that's all I want.
Dougie Beattie, GBNews, at the Down Royal Racecourse.
Now, millions of people across the UK have been warned over the risk of flooding, with predictions of a wet weekend ahead. Flood warnings are in place in parts of the north, southwest and southern England and parts of southern Scotland.
In the past few days, 40 properties have been flooded in parts of Cumbria and southern Scotland, with speed restrictions imposed by Network Rail Scotland. More heavy rain is expected this weekend, falling on already saturated ground in some parts. Well, John Ketley is a legendary weatherman and former meteorologist at the Met Office. Good morning, John. So tell us more about this weather that we're seeing. Is this normal? It was very awkward at the weekend. Lots of the trains up to Glasgow were cancelled. Those people trying to get up to COP26, they couldn't get there because of the rain.
Yeah, there's a certain irony there, isn't there, I have to say. But it is a fairly typical scenario, really, for this time of the year. You'd probably be looking at some remnants of tropical storms and hurricanes perhaps becoming embedded in the jet stream as it sweeps across the Atlantic during September and October. So we have seen this sort of scenario before on many, many occasions. If you look back over the past 20 years or so, we've seen similar pictures to this. Similar flooding situations in Carlisle, for example, in 2005. Cockermouth too, I think, in 2009. Do you remember that terrible incident where the policeman was swept off a bridge and he drowned? In similar flooding to this in 2009, I'm sure it was. And we've had it again since then. It's not always in the same place, but this is an area where we do get these typical situations where the jet stream becomes very slow moving. You get the conveyor belt of bands of rain coming up from the south or southwest. So it lulls for a short time, then the next pulse of rain comes back in again. And that's the situation that we've had for the past week, really. So some places have had, even in low ground, down in the Lake District, for example, Keswick, they've had in excess of 200 millimetres of rain, I should think, but up on the mountains, obviously, nearer to 300 to 500 millimetres of rain. So that's an awful lot of water, and it can only go one way, and that's down into the river catchments, and that's just what the problem is at the moment. It's swollen the rivers and everything's saturated.
Yeah, you see, calling it a pulse of rain, let me tell you, it was a heck of a pulse of rain. I was travelling down yesterday from the Highlands of Scotland to Edinburgh, driving in my car, my little ones in car seats in the back. It was actually really frightening. The rain was horizontal, the spray on the roads, the whooshes on the car going as fast as they could. Really, really difficult driving conditions. But as you say, the timing of all of this couldn't be more perfect, really. I mean, we've got the world descending on Glasgow this weekend, and yet they've got flooding in the area. And I suppose that's really what, world leaders are hoping to highlight, that we're getting this sort of terrible weather, which is incredibly difficult to manage.
Yes, some of the delegates are bound to say, oh, well, we told you so, didn't we? This is the sort of thing that's happening all the time. Now, it's always like this now. Every time we have a conference and we're talking about the global warming situation, this is what's going to happen. Well, that's not true. I mean, this is a fairly typical scenario for this time of the year. It happens most years, let me say that. And it's not always in the same place, as I say. It just happens to be up in northern England, southwest Scotland in particular at the moment, including Glasgow, obviously. But if you remember going back to 2013, the whole of southern England really was awash. We had the Somerset levels completely flooded out, and that went for the Thames Valley too. So that was 2013. Do you remember the Dawlish railway line as well? That was hanging in midair, wasn't it, for weeks? That was the same sort of situation. It's just that at that point, the jet stream was further south. But it is the sort of thing that does happen in this country. It is an extreme weather event. And these extreme weather events are set to become more frequent. There's no doubt about that. And there probably will be more rain on each occasion too. So there's a certain amount of global warming involved in all of this. Whether the climate's changing is a different matter. But global warming does produce these sort of scenarios.
John, how best can we prepare for this flooding? We were just hearing there 40 properties have been flooded in Cumbria and southern Scotland. Lots of those properties, it won't be the first time that they've been flooded. How best can we avoid this happening?
Well, we should stop putting houses in the wrong place. I'm not going to go down this political line about where we build houses and on floodplains, but it doesn't seem to make much sense, does it really? But historically, a lot of houses and buildings and terrace row. I was brought up in a terrace row right next to a river, in fact, between a river and a canal. And we got flooded as well, and that was some years ago, I have to say. But it's the sort of thing that happens and has always happened. So we've got to be a bit more careful, I think, where we put our houses these days. This sort of situation is not getting any better. It's very likely going to get worse in the decades to come. There's no doubt about that. And I might just say, while we're talking about the weather this weekend as well, there is going to be a lot of heavy rain in the south of England too. So there could be real problems there tomorrow.
Yeah, definitely wet weather gear this weekend. John Ketley, always good to have you on the programme. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Stay with us all the way till 10 o'clock this morning. Still to come this hour, Rhiannon Jones will be here taking you through the biggest sports stories. And she's also going to be joined by the former Tottenham and England manager, Harry Redknapp. Don't go anywhere.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday, called To The Point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the Channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
Time's just gone at 8:36. Time now to get all of the day's sports news. Here's Rhiannon Jones.
Thanks, Ellie. A busy day in the Premier League. 7 games today, but the big one takes place in North London this evening as Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's Manchester United take on Tottenham Hotspur. They'll be hoping to bounce back from their heavy defeat to Liverpool last weekend. Pressures have been mounting on Solskjaer following that 5-0 thrashing at Old Trafford.
It's been a difficult week, of course. It's we've had to deal with the result and performance against Liverpool, which we know that wasn't good enough, and that's something that footballers have to deal with. That's why we're in this game, and you've got to look forward to the next game. Make sure you're ready for that game, and when you get to that game, sort it out what has been challenging and the problems earlier on. And we've had a good week on the training field. I have to say that.
A good week, but no doubt a tough one. There is an intriguing matchup in the early kick-off as 2 of the formed teams go head-to-head. Arsenal, unbeaten in their last 8, face Leicester City. They haven't lost since September. The top 3 are all in action at 3 o'clock. Liverpool are at home to Brighton and Manchester City host Crystal Palace. They're both chasing leaders Chelsea, who are away at Newcastle. Meanwhile, Burnley face Brentford and Southampton go to Watford. In the Championship, it's 2nd against 3rd at lunchtime as Fulham take on West Brom at Craven Cottage. Last night, Jack Colback struck a 91st-minute equaliser as Nottingham Forest drew 1-1 at QPR. Scotland international Lyndon Dykes had opened the scoring. It's Colback's first league goal since March 2019. In Scotland, Celtic have the chance to go top of the league for the first time in the year as they welcome Livingston to Parkhead. They meet at 3. Current leaders Rangers are in action tomorrow against Motherwell. If Celtic slip up, Hearts, who are away to Aberdeen, and Dundee United, who are at home to St Johnstone, could both leapfrog Celtic. Meanwhile, Hibs are away to bottom club Ross County, and St Mirren face Dundee. To rugby now, and New Zealand-born Gareth Anscombe will make his first Wales start since 2019 when they face the All Blacks in Cardiff later. Wales head coach Wayne Pivac also faces his home country, and a particularly special game for him as his family, who he's not seen for the last few years, well, they'll be watching.
It honestly feels like home here because I can't get into the other countries. So for me, we've been here for 2 years now. You don't see your family, haven't seen them for 2 years. So I know they'll be supporting and they'll be watching, of course they will. But I guess with me doing the role I'm doing, there's a lot of friends and family back there and a lot around the globe that are supporting Wales now. So look, we just want to do well for people in Wales and people from outside of Wales that are supporting us.
Meanwhile, in the Premiership, Exeter launched a second-half fight-back and then survived a late Gloucester assault to win 16-13 at Kingsholm. Exeter trailed by 7 points before second-half tries from Alec Hepburn and Will Whitty secured a narrow win. Leaders Leicester are away to Northampton in one of 4 fixtures this afternoon. England's cricketers will be hoping to maintain their perfect start to the T20 World Cup this afternoon when they take on Australia. Owen Morgan's side sit top of Group 1 after 2 games in the Super 12s. They've already beaten holders West Indies and Bangladesh.
It's probably going to be one of our most difficult games in this group stage. Australia are a very strong side. They've gone 2 from 2, very much like us, and have started the tournament well. I think one thing that we'll be most proud of so far is our level of performance and intensity has been pretty good in the 2 games that we've played. Obviously, the challenge is continuing that for our next 3 games in pursuit of getting through to that next phase of the tournament.
Well, back to the Premier League game of the weekend, Spurs against United. Joining us now to discuss that big game at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, I'm delighted to say we're joined now by former Tottenham boss Harry Redknapp. Harry, thank you very much for joining us this morning. You know full well the pressure that comes with being a manager. How tough will this week have been for Solskjaer?
Oh, unbelievably tough. You know, I mean, I looked at him last week, stood on that touchline, and it looked lonely, 4-0 down. You know, it just what he must have been going through. I couldn't tell you. So he's had a week now, obviously, to reflect. He's got to look around that dressing room. He's got to find 11 players today who he knows will go out and give absolutely everything for the club and for him and for themselves. So he needs to pick the right team today. That's all important. He needs people he can rely on. And who look like they're up for a fight. You know, he doesn't want people that are going to go down under the pressure that they've been under this week and are going to sink and hide away. He needs people that are going to stand up today for him. So he's got to make sure he picks the right team. And if he does that, they've got a chance, you know.
And Harry, I'm sure you know this. When do you know, as manager, when your time's up? How does it work? How will it work at United? Will Ole know?
Yeah, I'm sure he may know, but he's not going to walk away. That's for sure. Listen, you don't walk away. You saw last week with Steve Bruce. Bruce had done all he could do at Newcastle, did an excellent job. And people said to me, well, he should walk away, perhaps, you know. He's got a contract. He's not going to walk away, you know. It sounds lovely, but he's not. And nor is Ollie. He's not going to walk away. He's going to fight to the end. He's going to try to turn it round. He's managing one of the greatest clubs in the world, so he's going to fight tooth and nail, you know, until the last gasp of breath he's got in him to turn this situation around. Because, you know, what could be not, if you want to be a football manager, managing Man United for him is his dream. So he's not going to let it go easy. He's going to scrap away to the end.
How does he, you know, the million-dollar question, how does he turn it round? Plenty of talk this week that he could or he should drop Cristiano Ronaldo, but that seems like solving one problem by creating another.
I wouldn't drop Ronaldo. Suddenly, it's amazing how Ronaldo, who seems to be the only one who ever scores, he even scored a great goal last week, got disallowed. He was offside by about a fingernail. Suddenly, Ronaldo starts getting the blame. It's amazing how they jump on somebody. You know, I looked last week, they've conceded 5 goals. That's not Ronaldo's fault. The back four was a complete mess last week. They made mistakes. You know, the Harry Maguire, who I'm a great fan of, just had a terrible day. You know, he's a leader. For me, he's the main man because he's the captain. You know, I absolutely love him as a guy and as a player. But he had a terrible day, and the people around him were in bad form. So it's not just down to Ronaldo. They need Ronaldo coming back today and maybe scoring a goal. And you know, they certainly. It's not his fault they had such a bad day last week. The back four, hopefully he's worked with them this week. Hopefully he's worked with the midfield when they haven't got the ball, doing some shape, defending better. And most of all, he needs characters today, strong characters.
And no doubt Ronaldo will score today because when he's needed, he delivers, doesn't he? A tricky game for
Absolutely,
United.
he's done it all his career.
But let's talk about Spurs. Nuno, how will he be approaching this one? Because he's under fire himself after a less than convincing start to the season, isn't he?
Yeah, I don't think he should be, though. I mean, you know, he came in and he took over a difficult situation. Harry wanted to leave and, you know, so it's not been easy for him. He can only get on and do. I look at the team; it's nowhere near what it was in the last few years. They've gone backwards in the last few years. They've lost some. You know, they've sold top players and they've not really replaced them with better players. So for me, you know, at the moment, he's got a bit of a job on his hands to try to get in that top 4 this year. I mean, that is where they should be. You know, he's got to try to. The only team he can shift out the top 4 would be Man United. They're not going to finish above Chelsea, Man City, or Liverpool. They look too good. But he's got to try to find a way of getting Tottenham back in the top 4 into Champions League football.
Let's talk about his selection issues ahead of this one, including what to do about Dele Alli and Harry Winks. What does he do? He alluded to the fact that they both lack commitment earlier in the week.
I didn't see that. I haven't read that or heard that. You know, I don't know what's happened to Dele Alli. I really don't. I'm such a fan of his. You know, 2 years ago for me, I just thought he would be a player that would go on and get, I don't know how many caps for England. He was an absolutely standout player for the national team and just, you know, up there with Harry Kane as the first name on the Tottenham team sheet. He seems to have lost his way. I mean, In the end, Pochettino couldn't get anything out of him. Mourinho came in, couldn't get a tune out of him, and now, you know, the new manager's having the same problems. I don't know, maybe someone needs somewhere to sort the boy out. He needs to sort himself out and get back to concentrating on doing what he does best in his life, and that is playing football, because he's a fantastic talent.
And speaking of fantastic talent, Harry Kane, but he has scored 1 goal in 8 Premier League appearances. What's it look like to you there?
Well, it's a difficult one again. You know, for me, Harry, there wouldn't be a better centre forward in the world than Harry Kane. But he wanted to leave, I think, in the summer when they got the offer. They were offered £130 million. I think I'd have been, you know, I think Daniel really should have took the money. And but you know, on the other hand, he's you know, sending out a message that, you know, we're not a selling club, we're a big club, we want to keep our best players. So full credit to him for doing that as well. I mean, it was a no-win situation really for Tottenham. You know, if they keep Harry, he's not going to be 100% happy. If they sell him, he's going to get stick for selling his best player. But they've ended up sticking with him and staying and not selling him. And now they've got to find a way, hopefully, of getting Harry back into top form again. He wouldn't go out there with a negative attitude. He's a great guy, trains well, he's a leader. It's just not going for him at the moment. They're not making enough chances. But he'll come on a run. Today, he could quite easily go and get 2 or 3 goals. You wouldn't put it past him.
You wouldn't. Now, Liverpool in action later against Brighton, Harry, after last week. Are Klopp's side now favourites in the title race, in your opinion? And if not, who is?
Well, it's wide open. I really couldn't pick a winner out the 3 teams this year. I think they've all got a big chance. Man City, Liverpool, Chelsea. They're 3 outstanding teams, and it's going to be wide open this year. It's going to be a great title race. But Liverpool, they look a team, you know, they've got a great feeling there. The fans are back in the stadium, which I have always said, if you ask me in all honesty which team would miss their fans the most, it would be Liverpool, because their fans are just incredible. The atmosphere at Anfield is second to none. You go anywhere in the world and you won't find an atmosphere quite like that. So I think Liverpool are going to be right there, that's for sure. It wouldn't surprise me to see them end up champions, but no more than it would surprise me if Chelsea or Man City won it. We've got 3 great teams, top managers, top players. So I'm really looking forward, but I wouldn't know where to put my money. But Liverpool certainly, you know, they've got a big chance.
Sitting on the fence a little bit there, Harry. Thank you so much.
No, I haven't. Honestly, it's so difficult to choose between the 3 of them. They've just all got great squads, you know. Yeah. Man City are amazing, the football they play. And if you're okay, if I have to nail my colours to the mast, I'll go with Liverpool.
Great, lovely. Sorry for putting you on the spot, Harry. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much for your time. That's all the sport. We'll be joined by former Wales winger Shane Williams to preview the big game with the All Blacks in just under an hour. See you then.
We love it, Rhiannon Jones putting Harry Redknapp on the spot there. We'll have more from her a little bit later on. But for now, of course, this was a big week of news, wasn't it? The Chancellor's budget on Wednesday. And it was particularly interesting for those who enjoy a pint, but also for those who work in the industry. Of course, it's been a tough time running a business during the pandemic.
Yeah, as attention turns to the United Nations COP26 conference on climate change that starts on Monday, environmental concerns may have slipped down people's priority lists.
But one craft gin producer in Cumbria, which describes itself as a climate-positive business, has already become net zero. Our North West of England reporter Bradley Harris has been finding out how they've been making a difference to the planet. He gets all the tough gigs, doesn't he?
This is a craft gin producer with a difference. Zoe Arnold Bennett is the co-founder of Shed One Distillery, a family-run micro-enterprise in Cumbria. They began trading in 2016 and describe themselves as a climate-positive business, already achieving net zero.
Net zero means achieving a balance between the greenhouse gases being put into the atmosphere and those taken out.
So how do they do it?
First of all, what we've got here is the actual still itself, and the still is connected to this little monster. This is what we designed in order to save the water. It's, as you can see, a whole load of water in the bucket, as it were, and then it has a pump that sits on here. The pump is then connected to the still. And what we need is we have to have a closed loop cooling system in order to keep everything safe. So while the still is actually on, that is pumping the water around and around and around and keeping everything nice and cool. And we can just keep reusing the water. So that's the closed loop cooling system that we use there. The other thing in our arsenal of sustainability is this little machine. And to be perfectly honest, it is quite addictive. So let me just turn it on. I think you'll get the idea of what happens. And here it is. So cardboard comes in with the juniper, with all other sorts of supplies. We then make it into this fabulous netting. We can wrap our bottles in the netting, and then we send those out to our customers. And if the customer wants to, they can use it for their own packaging, or they can even just put it on their compost heap, and it will easily just fall apart there. So that's what we do.
You might think this doesn't make a difference, but businesses like Zoe's, which employ fewer than 250 people, account for more than 99% of the UK's 6 million businesses.
Collectively, they produce almost a fifth of the nation's total greenhouse gas emissions. That's according to the Carbon Trust.
Zoe's business has a big commitment to the planet and a big message for those at the COP26 Climate Change Summit in Glasgow next month.
My message would be, think about every size of business. Think about every person who we want to get involved in sustainability. Yes, talk about the big things, but make it more manageable, make it more user-friendly, change the narrative and start helping places like ourselves to be more sustainable in the small ways, rather than throwing all these big projects at us, which can be so overwhelming and impossible.
Zoe will be keeping a close eye on the upcoming conference, but it certainly won't take her attention away from producing craft gin that's not only good for a Saturday night, but good for the planet too. Bradley Harris, GB News.
It's good news for you, isn't it, Ellie? I know you love a gin.
We both love our gin.
Gin is your tipple of choice.
Yeah, we should be there with Bradley, shouldn't we?
We should. He got a good gig there. Look, the G20 getting underway in Rome. The Prime Minister's already been to the Colosseum this morning. He's there, of course, with the rest of the world's leaders from developing or the fastest growing economies. We've been asking you this morning to get in touch about what you think they should be discussing. Plenty of you getting in touch. One has been saying they should be discussing another private jet ride whilst telling us to freeze in the winter. Max says thinks they'll be discussing who got the best mileage on their massive jets or their caravans of cars to get them around. They only need to meet in person to do backroom deals. Otherwise, they could do Zoom calls.
Yeah, lots of people are referring to that, aren't they? That lots of world leaders are in Rome now and they're heading to Glasgow on Monday. They're all heading on planes. So lots of people pointing that out. Someone else has said, I see Carrie Johnson has taken Boris with her to the Leaders' Summit. What an honour for him.
So cheeky. Nigel has said, discuss world population and overcrowding. We're artificially being made to live longer than nature intended. Result, a battle for resources. Candy says, Macron and Biden, a good pair of schemers. I wouldn't trust those two as far as you can throw them. Thank you for getting in touch. We love to hear what you think. Stay with us. One more hour of the Great British Breakfast, and we've also got your weather forecast. Let's take a look at what we're doing for you this weekend.
Good morning. Unsettled is the theme for this weekend. After some exceptionally wet weather over recent days, we have further warnings for heavy rain in the forecast. And the reason things are quite so unsettled, this large area of low pressure has been sweeping weather fronts across the country in from the Atlantic, and some of those have been slow moving and some of those have been giving some really intense downpours. And the